All right. Good evening, everybody. We are reconvening to regular meeting with nothing to report out of closed session. You're going to begin with our flag salute, and we have some students here tonight from Abbott Middle School who are going to lead us in our flag salute.
Please stand, everybody, and place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you guys so much for leading us in the flag salute. Would love for you guys to share a little bit about who you are and what grades you're in, how you're involved at school, any extracurricular activities.
So I am Caitlin Gretz, and I am Abbott Middle School's president. And some extracurricular activities I participate in are volleyball. I like to do arts and crafts. I participate in many clubs, such as the Kindness Club. I did the Environmental Club for a little bit, and then I also did Craft Club.
I'm Olivia Murray. I'm the secretary. I am in the Abbott Band. I do drama, and I'm also in a lot of clubs like Math Club, Kindness Club, things like that.
I'm Elliot Wiegand. I'm in 8th grade. I'm Abbott's treasurer. I love to play chess and piano, as well as soccer and basketball. I'm also in the band, and I love math.
I'm Audrey Lee. I'm the Abbott vice president. I like to do a lot of sports and drama, and I participate in a lot of school clubs.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing a little bit about yourselves. And I know you guys have some folks that you brought with you to this evening. Maybe we'll get a wave from all the parents in the audience that are here. And then also I know that your principal is here with you today. Right.
Were you going to share a little bit about your new building that's going on over there at Abbott? I think you had a little visit to it.
Yes, recently we took a tour of the new gym, and it's still undergoing construction, but it is absolutely beautiful. It is amazing, and we learned so many new things that we wouldn't have learned before. Like, this project is started in 2014, and it is $16 million worth of a project, and that is a lot of money, especially for a school. So it's just really nice to know that we have a community to back us up in these projects, and these things are built by you guys, by approving things and getting the funds to make this gym possible. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We would also like to say thanks to Mark Sherrill, who's over there, who led us in the tour.
Thank you guys so much. All right, we're going to move on to roll call. The record reflect that all 5 trustees are present this evening. Moving on to 3.4, approval of tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excuse me, and approval of minutes from our school visitations.
Motion to approve?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And Allison and Rebecca are abstaining because they weren't present. And then approval of our minutes from our last board meeting in November.
I make a motion to approve.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. and abstention from Allison. Okay, we are now going to recess our regular meeting and we're going to convene our annual organizational meeting. So really exciting to be able to start tonight with the ceremonial swearing in of new trustees. So Allison Proctor, congratulations, and Kenneth Chin. Ken, who was reelected, and so, yeah, go ahead and proceed.
I have to bring my paper, yes.
I am delighted to be able to do this with you tonight. I'd like you to repeat after me. I, Allison Proctor, do solemnly swear
I, Allison Proctor, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California,
and the Constitution of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
And we have a beautiful certificate for you
Thank you.
from the elections office. So here we go. Take a photo. And I think you have some family that would like to come up here and take a
do.
little photo with you. Would your family come on up and we'll get a photo with you?
I wanted to introduce you to my family. This is Tyler. This is my son. He's in 5th grade. And this is Jacob. He's in 4th grade. And this is my husband, Fong. And they're my #1 fans.
Congratulations, Allison, and welcome
you.
aboard.
Thank you.
Right. And now we have Ken Chin, and I believe he has a family member that's going to help with this. Here's the one that you probably will want.
When I was appointed, Joan swore me in the first
I
time.
did the
So
first one, so
this
now
time
you
I
have
have the
somebody
choice
else this
of-
time.
My beautiful wife to swear me in here. Yeah.
Okay.
This is- Okay. It's great for our duet here.
All right. I, Kenneth Chin, do solemnly swear
I, Kenneth Chin, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of California,
and the Constitution of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. I do have my kids here, but I don't. Oh, they do want it. They're going to come up. They had said before they didn't want to come up. This is my daughter Ashlyn. She's in 2nd grade, and this is my son Braden. He's in 4th grade.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is our election of officers. So we will go in order, starting with nominating a new president. I would like to nominate Noelia Corzo.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll move down to nominations for vice president.
I would like to nominate Rebecca Hitchcock.
Thank you. No, I'm stopping right there. Sorry. I appreciate the nomination, and it would be an honor to serve the district as VP, but I can't commit to the time requirements needed, and so with that, I nominate Ken Chin for vice president.
Do we have two nominations on the,
Both. Oh, no, I can't second it.
two nominations on the floor, right? So you had to withdraw.
We can say, well, we can start with the first and say if there are no more seconds, then we can say it fails for lack of second. So it fails for lack of second, and now we can move on to another nomination.
And I will second that nomination.
Let's have Rebecca redo.
Okay, redo. I nominate Ken.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And next we'll move on to nominations for clerk.
So I would love to nominate Rebecca to be clerk.
I second that.
All those in favor? Aye. And that's it, right?
We-
Trustee representative.
I would like to nominate Shara and Allison as the trustee representatives.
Is there one, or we can do two?
You have to have one.
Okay, one.
You have to have one that goes to the meeting. And then it's representative to that government committee
Oh,
on boundaries.
I would nominate Shara to be the trustee of record. Is that right?
Sure.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. We will move seats before resuming the meeting.
It's not going to be very graceful, folks. Give us a second.
Thought they wanted to stay to just.
You have
where we're at.
a way to move.
All right.
Here, I'll help you. I'll help you.
Oh, I move? Okay.
I think she moved. Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'd just like to make a quick comment. I just want to express how grateful I am for becoming the president of our board. I'm really proud of the work that our board has been doing, and I'm really excited about leading that work in the next year. I'm also very grateful to have my family here. I don't know if most people know this about me, but my parents migrated here from Guatemala, and my dad actually lives in Guatemala. He actually happens to be here tonight. So, you want to stand up, Dad? My son is also here, Mikey. So I'm just very grateful to our community, and we'll take a quick picture and do it.
1 second.
I'd also just like to make one comment. I just wanted to thank our outgoing President Shara Watkins for her leadership over the past year. For those who don't know, it was a tough year for us. We had a lot of stuff going on. We did a lot of accomplishments, and I just want to thank Shara publicly for her leadership over this past year.
Absolutely. Yeah, big shoes to fill over here, so we're not letting her go completely yet. She's going to be training me. So thank you, Shara. Okay, so we are going to be moving on to item 4.3, appointments by the president. And I'll just give a quick overview. This next item is, so in addition to our public meetings that we do, we also have positions as liaisons to different groups. So I'm going to go down the list and appoint our trustees to different committees. So I don't know if I have to do this one, but I'll just do it for fun. I'd like to appoint Dr. Joan Rosas as the secretary of the board. So for legislative representatives, I would like to appoint Rebecca and Allison, trustee Proctor and trustee Hitchcock. Do they have to accept, or we just?
You're appointing them.
Okay. All right, like it or not, just kidding. So liaisons to the San Mateo City Council will be myself and trustee Watkins. Liaisons to the Foster City Council will be myself and trustee Proctor. Liaison to the San Mateo Foster City Education Foundation will be trustee Watkins. Liaison to the PTA Coordinating Council will be trustee Hitchcock and Proctor. I'm saving Ken for last. Liaison to the CDAC, the Special Education District Advisory Committee, will be trustee Hitchcock. Liaison to the District English Language Advisory Committee will be myself and trustee Chin. Surprise. Liaison to the Sanctuary Task Force will be myself and trustee Chin. Liaisons to the Enrollment Growth Study Group will be trustee Chin and trustee Watkins. We're almost done, okay? I know there's a lot of work happening, so that's a good thing. Liaisons to the Equity Task Force will be myself and trustee Watkins. Liaison to the Homeroom Committee will be trustee Chin. And liaisons to the Communications Committee will be trustees Proctor and Hitchcock. And last but not least, liaison to the not yet in existence but soon will be the Facilities Advisory Committee, and that will be trustee Chin.
Labor management.
Oh, that one. Oh my goodness. Okay. Liaisons to the Labor Management Initiative. I seem to have forgotten this one off of my list, so this one is really important. Trustee Watkins, no?
I'm just saying we can see if who's interested.
Oh, okay, yeah. Is that, who is interested? It's a really important one. Okay, I'm happy to continue if, okay. So, okay, trustee Chin, you're appointed. Anyone else interested? I've already been on it for 2 years now, so I'm happy to hand that over if anyone is interested. Meetings are about every other month.
It's a month at 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, which I have not been able to attend, so it's probably best that I do not continue.
Mm-hmm. Are we allowed to have that? Okay, I'm happy to continue that one for now, and we can talk about making changes if that comes up. Okay, I believe that is the completion of our appointments. And so I will now adjourn our annual organizational meeting. And that's adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry, I need a vote on this, actually. It says vote.
Motion to adjourn that organizational meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's adjourned. So, we will be reconvening now. Well, actually, can we have like a brief 2-minute intermission at this point? Bathroom break?
Mhm.
Okay, 2 minutes.
You do what you want.
Presidential prerogative.
Okay.
Also, for the students, you guys are welcome to stay for a meeting, but you also don't have to. I forgot to say that.
I don't know how I didn't have that on my list. Like, what's the month? Okay. Okay, so I would like to reconvene us back to our regular meeting, and we are moving on to our distinguished schools item. And so I'd just like to recognize that we have Elmer Martinez from Jerry Hill's office of the 13th District, and Kevin Fong representing District 22, Kevin Mullen's office.
Thank you, President Corso, and honorable members of the Board of Trustees. It's an honor to be here tonight. Let me introduce my colleague, Kevin Fong, from Kevin Mullen's office. It's an honor to be here tonight on behalf of the Senator and Assemblymember Mullen to present these resolutions honoring Burrell and Bowditch Middle Schools as 2019 California Distinguished Schools. With this prestigious honor, Burrell and Bowditch join only 160 other schools who were selected from around the state of California. Honorees are recognized for achieving exceptional student performance for 2 consecutive years or closing the achievement gap between 2 school years. As trustees, you know that schools thrive when everyone, teachers, administrators and staff, parents and students work together. And through your joint efforts, you have provided the students with a firm foundation upon which they can use to build their future development, as well as a sense of community and inclusiveness that is instilled in each student. So, on behalf of Senator Hill and Assemblymember Mullen, congratulations to all who made this achievement possible, and we wish you all the best in the coming year. Thank you, everyone.
We do have representatives from each of the schools. Would you like to come up, representatives from Burrell and from Bowditch, to accept these beautiful resolutions and have a photo taken? We have Jessica Noddy from Burrell and Caleb Bowers from Bowditch. Thank you. Here we go again.
Yeah. It's that way. Good.
Thank you so much, and we're so grateful for the work that our schools are doing in closing the achievement gap. Okay, so we are moving on to item 6.2, permanent status, certificated staff.
Good evening, members of the board, students, staff, parents, and community. We are living in unprecedented times. And in this current climate focused on testing and accountability, inadequate school funding where we're 41st in the nation, increasing student needs and public scrutiny, there's no harder time than now to be a teacher. As we can see from the teacher shortage, few are choosing to accept the challenge to be an educator. However, we are so very fortunate to honor 33 teachers who have more than met the challenge and exceeded expectations to earn permanent status in the San Mateo Foster City School District. And tonight, we recognize 12 of those teachers who are present and will represent all their colleagues who have earned tenure with the district. To those teachers being recognized, thank you not only for educating our children, but nurturing them, seeing the best in them, believing in them when sometimes they don't believe in themselves, and encouraging them to seek their greatest potential. On behalf of the San Mateo Foster City School District, we thank you for choosing to teach and to do so in our district. Congratulations on your accomplishment. At this time, I'd like to invite principals to the podium to recognize their teachers. And we will begin with Principal Jeremy Packman of Abbott Middle School.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to announce Mr. Dennis Clement, an incredible PE teacher and athletic director.
Wait one moment. We normally have the board come up so that they can at least congratulate you.
Okay.
So we'll get the board in place here.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll do a group at the end. Okay. Next, I'd like to invite up Mr. John Cosmos from Bayside.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to introduce Mr. Michael Castro. He is our music teacher on the middle school side. Mr. Will Caton, PE teacher, 7th grade. And Miss Crystal Dahl, 1st grade teacher. I am extremely proud of these 3 educators, outstanding teachers, and they absolutely deserve this recognition. So thank you all.
Next, I'd like to invite up Mr. Steven Schwang, principal of College Park.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to have this opportunity to introduce my teacher from College Park. First one will be Celine Zhang, Zhang 老师, a kindergarten Chinese teacher. And Xiaolin He, He 老师, 2nd grade bilingual teacher. And Nicole Rasul, our gate teacher. They went extra mile to help our school all the time, are always supportive all the time. We truly appreciate to join our team. Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to invite up Special Education Director, Ms. Alma Ellis.
Good evening. We would like to recognize Connie Chan, one of our psychologists. Congratulations.
I'd like to invite up Lana Fenich, principal of Highlands Elementary.
Good evening. It's my honor and privilege to introduce 2 amazing teachers. The first one is Yvonne Schilling. And our second one is Stephanie McClyman. Yvonne teaches 4th grade and Stephanie teaches 1st. Congratulations.
And lastly, but not least, Elena Barrera Cruz, principal of Sunnybury Elementary.
Good evening, everyone. It's my honor to introduce to you 2 amazing Sunnybury teachers. First, I want to introduce Elena Canizaro, kindergarten teacher. And last but not least, also a kindergarten teacher, but now Spanish teacher, Miss Samantha Casey.
So again, congratulations to our teachers, and thank you to their family and friends for coming to support our teachers. At this time, if all of our teachers would come forward for a photo. We also have refreshments available if you wish to take photos with your families and continue celebration out in the lobby. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Just this way so we're not looking at the screen. You're gonna have to tighten it up. If you're tall, sneak in the back, be the short in the front. You can kneel. Squeeze in. No, I can't reach you. You get on this side. Wow. Okay, what group? Okay, look over here. Thank you.
So as our teachers are leaving the room, I'd just like to say how, pivotal having really amazing teachers is to the work that we all do for our kids. So we're very grateful. Okay. We are moving on to item 7.1. Where did my slides go?
Sue has them.
Okay. Public statements related to non-agenda topics. The San Mateo Foster City School Board cannot act upon any matter that has not been included and publicly posted on the agenda except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. The board may refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Please limit your statements to 3 minutes.
President Corzo, we have one request to address the board for a non-agenda item. That's Mr. Ian McCullough. We also have two requests to address the board. One is for consent item 8.1.4, and one is for consent item 8.2.10.
Okay. Can you repeat those two one more time, please? 8.1.4.
8.2.10.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Ian McCullough, if you please come up to the podium.
Thank you, and congratulations to you all on your new roles. And congratulations to Trustee Proctor, and the clock starts going. I come before you as the membership chair for the George Hall Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association. My members are frustrated and disappointed by the solution to some challenges that have come up across the fall. And with recognition of the complexity of the situation that merits the installation of a fence on our playground, we do want to express concern and open the possibility of other solutions as we move forward. Point number one is the nature of the solution. There's only a limited amount that can be disclosed publicly. I respect that. But parents do talk and information is shared. And we have a situation where we are committed as a community and a campus to have the most inclusive community and campus possible. There were staff members who, at the end of the day, were not doing their job, and that created a safety issue that needed to be addressed. The solution that is in place from our perspective is one where it takes our commitment to inclusion across the board and effectively is separating the play area and saying to students, you are not allowed to play with those students. This is a safety issue. There's mental health, there's socio-emotional pieces associated with that. And if there is an opportunity before construction starts to talk about other possibilities, we would like to do so and problem solve. The second piece is timing and communication. This may be the right solution given the complexities of the situation. I hope we can find another one. The rapid rollout of this information, which we understand to be a district decision, has been a challenge for our faculty, our office staff, and for the PTA this week, as information kind of came to the parent community Monday rather by surprise. No drawings have been furnished. We don't know what this thing is going to look like. So it's a highly speculative, rollout in very fast order over winter break. And there's been a lot of conversations that have been quite a distraction at a busy time of year. So if there's an opportunity to delay, to show us what it would look like, that would be more constructive for our community and help people understand what we're trying to solve and come to mutually beneficial solutions rather than carving up the playground. Thank you for the time.
President Corso, we also have another speaker that would like to speak to a non-agenda item, Amy Fickinger.
Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Fickinger, and as you know, my child is the one who got off campus at George Hall this fall during recess due to quite an egregious lack of supervision by his one-on-one aide. So as Ian mentioned, George Hall parents were informed this week regarding the fence to be constructed over break, and I've personally had many parents approach me to find out if this is something that I believe is necessary to keep my child safe, and if I believe that this is in response to this experience we had in the fall. So I certainly understand and appreciate the district's efforts to improve safety for all children, but I think it's important to take the opportunity to emphasize that environmental changes and barriers do not and cannot take the place of appropriate supervision. So in our situation, a fence like this may not have made a difference because my child was just not being supervised. So all in all, I believe that recess is not a break for school staff, and in the end, diligent supervision is what keeps all of our children safe. So my questions are, how does this fence impact our children's ability to access their peers, their friends, and their siblings? How will outdoor activities outside of recess, such as PE, be impacted by this partition? What changes, if any, to the current supervision plan during recess will be made, and does it impact the supervision ratios? All children are kept safe when they're appropriately supervised. This fence is an adult-centered solution to a supervision issue and challenge. I don't personally feel that a fence is necessary, and I believe that more effective use of funding would be for additional training for the current adults providing yard supervision and for hiring additional paras to support our students throughout the day and at recess. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, moving on to item 7.2. Public statements related to agenda items. Persons will be called on at the appropriate time. And now to foundation and committee reports.
Okay, I'm not used to starting. Equity Task Force, but I was not able to attend, so I'll ask that Dr. Rosas give an update on the Equity Task Force, please.
The Equity Task Force did meet this week, and the majority of the meeting was spent on looking at core district data, which is actually a presentation that's going to be made tonight. District folks had, the District Equity Task Force had a lot of questions. It was a powerful conversation, and from it, they are looking at ways to access some of the schools that are beating the odds and would like to set up some visitations and some further informational conversations. So it was a very good meeting.
That's it for me.
Nothing from me.
We had a homeroom committee meeting, gosh, it seems like forever ago because it was before Thanksgiving, which we discussed further topics, we did further discussed educator housing in various different parts of the county. So stay tuned on that.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, moving on to announcements.
So I guess one announcement that I was thinking, I guess could go under Foundation Committee when I move forward with the Ed Foundation, even though I was just appointed tonight. But just to let everyone know, I know that Audrey shared in the previous meeting that the Ed Foundation was considering, or that I had presented the option of a gala to the Ed Foundation and leading that. And they voted, and we will be moving forward with a gala in fall of 2020, so ironing out dates and et cetera now. And we'll be looking for a committee to support. So for anyone in the audience or on the board that's interested in, or the district, that's interested in supporting the gala work and being on the committee for that, please let me know. We'll be kicking off right away in 2020.
I don't have any announcements. Okay, there are no other, oh, go ahead. Sorry?
No, sorry.
Oh, now you have to give an announcement. I want to know.
I don't know if we want to talk, so we did go to the CSPA Conference.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, the California School Board Conference, School Board Association had their annual conference in San Diego, and that was last week, 2 weeks ago. I think we're going to maybe possibly have a debrief during our governance meeting, but I just wanted to share a couple of things that I found really impactful. Often when you go to these conferences, sometimes it's a lot of consultants who are just looking for additional work, but there were a number of sessions that were extremely powerful. Some of them involved some really great ideas. There was a district who did a budget roadshow to further explain what the budget was, and they broke it down to how a teacher in a lesson plan would explain the budget. I found that was really great. There was, which was sort of unfortunate, but our CSPA Association did endorse the new Prop 13, which is coming out on the March ballot, which is AB 48, which is a $15 billion school facilities bond for the state of California, which sounds great, but unfortunately for our district, we will potentially lose up to $4 million. So that's unfortunate. There was great conversations about climate change and solar, and then there was unfortunate topics about undocumented students and what they go through, and I found that very enlightening. But the one thing I will say, and I would love to share this with the rest of the board later and during the governance session, was a Golden Bell recipient, which is CSBA awards certain districts for called the Golden Bell for great ideas, whatever, great programs, really leading the pack in terms of California. And the one that really got me jazzed, and I will say jazzed, was a music immersion program. And so we have Mandarin, we have Spanish. There's one district in the state that actually decided to do a music immersion experience, and it was music every single day. And so it was a fantastic topic, and they related to the scores and data, and ultimately their scores actually went up, and this was an elementary school. And so suspensions, disciplines, everything went down, and academics went up, and it just shows the connection between sort of the left and right brain. But I would love to share that with you guys later on as we do in the governance session.
Thank you. Yes, I also attended that conference, and the workshops are definitely, I would say, essential to really learning about what other districts are doing and how they've done it. I think it helps inform, just like possibilities that we have for the future in our district. Another really powerful thing that I'd like to share about attending that conference was just the relationship building that happens with other school districts and other board members. It's a very supportive community, and there's a lot of good work happening. And as the school board community becomes more and more diverse, I think we're going to be seeing hopefully more significant changes across our entire state. And I did also want to shout out Nicole Anderson. She is going to be supporting our district in really looking at our equity work. And she actually has done that work already with the California School Boards Association. So she's supported multiple school districts across the state in starting that work. And so one of the workshops that I attended was basically like a report out from different districts that have done this work, some going as far back as, having started the work 8 years ago. And so getting to learn about, the lessons that they have learned, and some of their obstacles, and some of, what has really driven their work forward. So I'm really excited that we're working with Nicole, and I'm hoping that has a really significant impact. Okay. So moving on to the proposed consent agenda.
So before you start the consent agenda, I had wanted to provide some additional information to the entire board on 2 items. One was 8.1.4 and 8.2.10. So I'd like to ask that those be pulled so that I can provide that information to everyone and then voted on after. So unless there's others to pull, I would suggest the rest be voted on at this time.
So unless somebody has something else, I'll make a motion
I
to.
wanted to just, on one item, I wanted to discuss and maybe get some information on 8.2.13, the listing of payments to meet district expenditures. Just a comment or request.
Okay. So I make a motion to approve the proposed consent agenda with the removal of 8.1.4, 8.2.10, and 8.2.13.
Comment.
So that was Rebecca giving the second, and all those in. Oh,
I have a comment.
before.
Just, I'd like to comment before we vote on the consent item. I'm not pulling the item, but the item 8.2.15, gifts presented to the schools. I wanted to just publicly thank Ms. Joyce Matarian for her substantial donation to our school district. Often we get donations all the time, and there are various different amounts, and sometimes the larger donations are anonymous, and sometimes they aren't. This one is a substantial donation. I just would like to publicly thank her for her donation in the honor of Miss Dorothy Bohannon. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 So before you continue, I do want to say that you have just accepted a new principal into the fold. It's actually a principal we already have, but she's going to be doing a lateral. Miss Amy Snow is going to be moving from Beresford to the new school in Foster City. And for those of you who don't know her, she does hold a master's from San Diego State University, and she has single subject and multiple subject teaching credentials and an administrative services credential. She's been an elementary and middle school teacher in both private and public schools. She's served as an instructional coach in the English language arts right here in our district. Recently, of course, she is the principal of Beresford, and they have been doing incredible work over there related to positive school climate, increased family engagement, and improvement of student achievement. So in your last few years, you and your staff have worked very hard to implement new language arts, new math, different strategies for EL learners, lots of good work at Beresford, and we really appreciate that, and looking forward to what you will bring to the new school in Foster City.
Great. Well, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be the new principal of a new school that doesn't usually happen in districts. So I am honored that I've been chosen, and I look forward to it and really excited. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Congrats.
Okay, so we will be
Take a second if they want to.
Did you want to introduce your family?
Yeah.
Want a picture?
Yeah.
This is my son, Alfie. He's in kindergarten at Pacifica, elementary school. This is my husband, Corey Snow.
Yeah, do the pictures.
Just kidding.
You guys are okay. You're all right. Congratulations. Okay, so item 8.1.4.
We have Speaker Randy Painter.
Yes, but I would like to provide a little bit of information about this item.
Okay.
If you don't mind. The reason that I had wanted to pull it was that I wanted to make sure that everyone understands why these policies are coming back this way. As you know, we had federal program monitoring team that came in, and they were following a guidance from Javier Becerra related to immigration rights. And I had sent, 9 months or more ago, his guidance to all of you, and I know that the Sanctuary Task Force uses them. The guidance has in it certain wording that should be in your district policies. And so it ended up being a number of different policies that had to be updated with this language for to respond to the immigrant rights information. So I am asking that you do approve these because of the fact that the federal program monitoring folks will not release us unless we have this language in place. So if there are any other things that you would like to talk about in these policies, we could bring them back and address those things too. But the reason these are here before you is to satisfy the request from the law to address immigrant rights.
Okay, Randy?
Good evening. In the revised policies, page 97, the following is stated under questioning and apprehension by law enforcement. Except in cases of child abuse or neglect, the principal or designee shall attempt to notify the student's parent/guardian as soon as practicable after the law enforcement officer has interviewed the student on school premises. As a parent, I shudder to think of my children being questioned by law enforcement or an SRO without my prior knowledge, consent, or presence, knowing that even as bright as they are still K through 8 age children. And my children happen to have a lot of privilege. There are many, many of our students in this district that face barriers in terms of racism, language, socioeconomic opportunity, and disability that could influence interactions with law enforcement. Shouldn't we protect our students, especially our vulnerable and marginalized ones, instead of exposing them? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not even on the Equity Task Force. But it didn't take much effort for me to locate the October 2016 publication from the ACLU of Northern California entitled "The Right to Remain a Student: How California School Policies Fail to Protect and Serve." The following recommendations come from there, as well as detailed examples from other California districts about how to do this better. So it says there, concerning student questioning, police should not interview students on school campuses during school hours absent a real and immediate physical threat to students, teachers, or public safety. In limited circumstances, when police must question students on school campuses, school districts should require that police show a legal warrant, consult with the principal, explain the reason for the interview, the reason the interview must be done at school, and obtain consent before proceeding. Conduct the interview in a private location outside of instructional time. Notify the student's parents or guardians immediately and ask for their consent before the interview begins. Advise the student of his or her constitutional rights, including the right to remain silent and explaining that anything that they say can be used against them. Allow the student to have his or her parent or guardian present during questioning, or if they're unavailable, if the student prefers, a school employee of the student's choosing. As trustees, you have the responsibility to make policies or direct the superintendent to make policies that are better than what is proposed for your vote on this consent agenda. I strongly urge the board not to accept these policies and to reconsider this specific recommendation, regardless of the source, be it the district or the CSBA. Our district can do better than this, and we can protect our children better than this. Thank you.
I do need to make a comment that that piece of the policy was not the part that was changed. So the pieces that were added were related to the immigration language. So that was already in policy. So I had been asked already about that piece and have asked legal counsel to weigh in so I can have some information for you before the next board meeting. I don't have it at this time.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment that, and I guess an ask, make a comment that this policy is already in our book, so this vote doesn't change that part. It changes the part about immigration, but I think this is one of those examples of when we do take a closer look at particular policies and other things are revealed then about the policy that aren't things that we're okay with. I absolutely agree that I would like for us to think or to consider ways that we can rework that. I would like to ask you, Randy, to share that link with us and with Dr. Rosas so that our legal counsel can take into account the ACLU recommendations and would ask them that the policy be brought back to our next board meeting. But to vote on the changes that are supportive of our immigrant students and then to look at the policy that's already in place.
Any other comments? I just want to say I agree, so I'm going to make a motion. Oh, I wanted to make a comment. Okay. Yeah, so just piggybacking off of what Shara said, I think this is why it's so important that, our community stay involved, because there are definitely opportunities for our board and our district to do things better. And, we have to read through so much documentation that it's actually really helpful when we have folks in our community, parents, teachers, classified staff, and anyone and everyone that's part of our community want to get involved and help us to make not just policies better, but practices and actual decisions that affect students. So I'm definitely in support of us taking a look at this policy further. I do also want to share that this particular issue, I think, hits a little close to home for me. I have a sister that's 17. She went through our school district. She had a little situation that, wasn't that kind of was similar, and so I'm just grateful that Randy, that you've brought this to our attention and that we will get to look at this. I do also think that, when I requested that we, create a sanctuary task force, it was, it did have the intention of looking closer at issues that affected some of our English learners and our immigrant population, but also, just thinking about sanctuary in general for all students and what that means. and in interactions that happen sometimes, on a daily basis in our district and can be overlooked. So I feel like this is one of those opportunities. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that. And
Just a quick question.
yes.
Just a quick question as we follow up on this is whether or not this is one of the standard CSBA policies, if that part is their language, or whether or not we have modified it over time. And so when you come back.
That's why I did ask legal counsel to look at it and to please let us know what it can be modified to, what are our options. And they were unable to get back to me today. So I have to bring it at the next meeting. I had hoped to have it tonight, but I don't have it.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you. I just would love to know that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also just want to say that I don't know if folks, we do have school resource officers in our middle schools, all of them, and so when we think about how our students are interacting with police and who are the students that are more frequently interacting with police and what those interactions look like. I think this is very closely related to a lot of the questions that I had for the San Mateo Police Department specifically, but I think this is all kind of like connected, and so I would love to dig a little deeper into this at a future date. So, yes, next board meeting. Okay, so moving on to item, we need to motion. Okay.
Sorry, motion.
Oh, okay, so all those in, did we
I don't
get a
think
second?
so. We didn't officially do that.
I was going to make the motion.
Okay.
I apologize.
Do I have a motion? Speaking to the mic.
I motion to approve it.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item 8.2.10.
Okay, so I had wanted to provide some additional information around this item and an opportunity for you to ask questions. We are in the process, as you well know, of building very large facilities. And when you are building large facilities and you run into issues, there are change orders, and change orders have to be determined fairly rapidly because delays in large construction items can cost quite a bit of money. So this process of putting this 10%, up to 10% in place means that I would be able to approve change orders up to a certain point. And if we don't do that, I do have to pull you together. There's a 72-hour posting and getting a quorum, and sometimes it could be more than 72 hours if I can't get you together immediately. This process has been vetted by our legal counsel. Now, there's still, these changes would still be presented to you in public, in your packet. They would go under business, would go for information. So you would see the change order, you would see that it had been moved forward, it was for information for you. Now, we do want to make sure that you have the information that you have requested about where we are with these different projects and the amounts of money being spent. So one of the things I want to point out is that there is a new change order format, and you'll see it in this packet. So for example, if you pull out 826, which is the Bayside Gym, and you look at it, you have an itemized list of changes, and it shows the contract sum and the changed contract sum. And at the bottom of that sheet, it tells what has been previously authorized, what's being authorized, and the percent of the change order amounts to the original contract in total, so that you can track how these changes are moving. So that's one change that we've made. And in addition, there's a new sheet that's in your packet, which is far easier to read and more complete for you on all the items. So this sheet also has each Phase 1 and Phase 2 project. It has the presentation of the original budget, the expenses to date, what's encumbered and what is remaining. And you will note that Phase 1 does have budget remaining. Now, it's not going to have $16 million remaining at the end of all of this, but you can see that there is money there for changes that may come. So by spring, most of our projects will be almost completed. So this number, this remaining budget number, will be very clear by then. So you'll have a much more refined ending budget. So this will be changed as each month, and it'll say at the top of the chart when it was last updated. So this one was updated as of December 4th. So each time you'll have the date that it has been updated. In addition to these changes that are public, in order for us to track where we are, we have a new internal tracking form that's a very extensive form that tells us exactly where we are in negotiations with different items, where we're moving to, and that then is exactly correlated to what you're getting here and in this change order. So I did want to really point that out and to tell you that if you do this, it's not carte blanche, and it is reported under the business section. So I wanted you to have that additional information.
Okay, public comment, Randy?
So in agenda item 8.2.10, the superintendent proposes that you hand over your authority to approve change orders. This modification that is presented is the following. Any subsequent change or alteration of a contract shall be governed by the provisions of Public Contract Code 20118.4. The superintendent or his or her designee is authorized to execute change orders related to said work for time extensions and payment not exceeding 10% of the low bid in the aggregate. As an aside, I would like to have seen how time extensions are calculated into the 10% overage aggregate, but the attachment that was uploaded on the agenda was the same policies attachment uploaded for agenda item 8.1.4 and didn't seem to relate at all to this actual agenda item. Now, I totally understand wanting to move these projects along. You got to do it, right? And sure, it's routine for you guys to rubber stamp the change orders via the consent agenda. I do hope that each of you does scrutinize the consent agenda because all of these things are your responsibility. I am concerned because there are several ongoing projects with budgets that even our students noted are in budgets of many tens of millions of dollars. 10% of tens of millions of dollars still adds up to a lot of millions of dollars. And the superintendent is asking you to hand over the right to approve that spending, not just now, but for all boards and superintendents going forward. Because once you hand over that authority, good luck on wrangling that control back to the probably future board. I'd like to present an alternate strategy that Dr. Rose has just described, that you commit to meeting for short special meetings as needed with the requisite 72-hour notice if the approval of the change order is urgent. I really do appreciate the time that you all already spend as elected public servants. Keep yourselves effective by retaining this authority. The plan, as presented, is not transparent. It does not lend itself to transparency. It seems to me that this agenda item should not be approved for several reasons. It was presented without enough information for the requisite 72-hour public review. It gives away too much board responsibility and authority when there is a reasonable workaround, especially given that you already receive nearly constant feedback that fiscal transparency has not been a longstanding strength in this district. I urge the board to take a moment, breathe, and not approve this agenda item now, or maybe even possibly ever. Thank you.
Any comments?
Yeah, one. I feel a little uncomfortable with the 10%, and wondering whether, because like the $17 million that they just talked about, the gym, 10% of that is quite a bit. So I'm wondering if there's any options to set a dollar amount, or else I would be in favor of meeting about a significant change.
Can that be looked into if we can change it to a dollar amount? You want me to bring it back?
Any other comments? Ken?
I think we should probably pull it back since the attachment was not the correct attachment for that purpose. For that purpose alone, I know that I have expressed that what I've seen through public contracting and everything else. There is a little bit more latitude that is given to department heads and directors and everyone else to keep the ball rolling. Because it is true in the construction field, time is money, and so. I do understand that also, like when we have all tried to sort of get together for various different things, and we've been pulled to try and get together for whatever it is. It's difficult sometimes for us all to get together outside of our normal Thursday meetings. So I think that not request, I guess, but the pulling of this item and the continuance of this item to a date to be determined would allow us to further vet the options of whether it's a set dollar amount or set percentage or no changes at all.
And I think bringing it back with those options makes sense. And then also, and maybe you have the answer to this now, maybe not, for the meetings, can they be via phone or do they need to be in person? Because just echoing as much as I would love to say, yes, we can do that, I do know that it is virtually impossible to get us all together, and it might, that isn't going to solve the problem in terms of moving construction along, which I know is a challenge, especially when, in these months when we're only meeting once a month. So is phone possible?
Remember when we do meetings and you have to be somewhere else, you have to post the sheet on the place where you will be at the 72 hours before the meeting. And so you could do that. If you're going to be at your place of work, you can certainly post it there, and we can put the address on there.
I think I learned at the CSPA conference that maybe a quorum has to be physically together, so we can't all be.
No. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
I will just say that I am in agreement in pulling this one and bringing it back with a little bit more information. I do also want to just recognize that, like folks have already said, it can be really difficult for us to meet more often than we already do for our regularly scheduled meetings. So there are a lot of I think consequences either way. We've had projects be pushed back a lot, and as we look towards the future and what other facilities needs are in our community, we do have to balance all of those things. So but I agree that this is very important and we should take more time to consider it.
I'll make a motion to continue item 8.2.10 to a date uncertain.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and moving on to item 8.2.13.
I just wanted to make a request / comment since I'm new to this. The list of warrants is about 33 pages long, and so for someone who's kind of new here and really taking a closer look, I was wondering if we could maybe get a little more detail as to what, a little bit more description as to what some of the expenses are, because I had to Google a lot of the vendors just because I don't know what they do, and so I looked at a few school districts very close to here, and I see that they have a very brief description. It's not something in detail, but it at least would kind of clue somebody into what is being paid. That's my request. And maybe we could just take a look at that and see if that even makes sense, or if it's...
Yeah, I will say that I remember when we first started that we had a lot of questions about that too. And back then, I think things were like organized in a kind of like an odd, it felt odd to me, but we then requested that they be, I think it was like maybe possibly alphabetical and then grouped by vendor, alphabetical, and then by amount. So there have been some changes, but wasn't aware that there are districts that have like descriptions, and I think that would be helpful. So thank you for that suggestion.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but I think, this also is going to, like, small changes can be really helpful for transparency and the community. So thank you for making that suggestion. And yeah, I'm all for kind of looking at how other places do it and if it's, easier to interpret that way.
I move to approve the warrant list, the listing of payments to meet district expenditures.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, okay, moving on to item 9.1, California School Boards Association Delegate Assembly nominations.
Did you want me to give a little bit of background?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the California School Board Association has a delegate assembly, and there are delegates who are elected to this assembly. They meet to do the business of the California School Boards Association. And this year, there are 3 positions in our region that are coming open. I do believe that there is interest by the people who do hold those 3 positions to continue, and so they will probably be putting in a nomination from their boards, my guess is. However, with 3 openings, I did want to bring this item forward to see if you might be interested in nominating one of your own to the CSPA Delegate Assembly. Paperwork is due in January, so we have to move on this. It's due January 7th.
Okay, so I would just like to say that I had a suggestion for who we could nominate, but after kind of like checking out the landscape of the CSBA delegate world, yeah, we do have some amazing delegates that are running for re-election that are, doing some really good work that they definitely want to continue. And so I personally will not be nominating anyone, but I do want to just say that there is an opportunity to have more influence in our local San Mateo County School Board Association. They need a lot of help with things and could use some folks in that space. So yeah, I'm hoping some folks from our board will get involved with that. And yeah, so I will not be nominating anyone.
All right, thank you. I just did want to bring it forward in case anyone was interested. So we will close that item.
Okay. So, okay. So, we will be moving on. Trustee Watkins will be back shortly. Moving on to item 10.1, 2019-2020 first interim report.
Thanks, everybody. Slide deck here. Okay, thanks, everyone. Got the mic here. First, I want to thank Christine and her staff for all their hard work putting this information together for us for the first interim. And so, too, for me, when we put this information together for you, I utilize the same format you've had in the past. So, comparable to Alice, when you're talking about this, we need some changes to this. There's different formats or information you'd like to see in this, then let's have a chat about it. because it's all about transparency, about process. So cycle-wise, we're doing this first interim report for you, and we're taking a look at the adopted budget, and we're taking a look at the changes to that adopted budget. Between the adopted budget and the first interim, we have the unaudited actuals, which the board takes action on in October, and then we take a look at the information as of October 31st. So we're sharing with you what that trend is, what those differences are, okay? So that's kind of a recap here in this slide. We talk about the changes to revenue, changes in expenditures, then we want to look at your ending fund balances, and we want to take a look at your multi-year projections as well, too, okay? So that's what these slides capture for you here, too, and then we talk about next steps in terms of the budget process. Okay, so first interim, we're incorporating lots of different changes into this. From a revenue perspective, we're looking at property taxes, federal, state, local changes. From an expenditure perspective, too, I talked about that process that when we go through, when we adopt the budget, when we have the unaudited actuals in October that you act upon, that's when we define what your carryover is from the prior year. When you adopt the budget, you have an estimated amount, but you don't know what your actual carryover is until you go through your unaudited actuals. So your first interim weaves that information into it, what the carryover is, and we recognize that from both a revenue perspective and from an expense perspective. And we talk about, when we look at the spreadsheet in a moment or two, we're going to see what some of those amounts are, okay? And so it says things here like we're revising salary expenditures based on where people are actually placed. We're taking a look at expenditures such as your medical expenditures and, you know, CalPERS, the CalPERS medical program. They don't define those rates finalized. They're not finalized until July. So you adopt in June. They finalize the rates in July. We incorporate those changes in the first interim. And then we also include things if there's changes to your workers' comp rates, which there were some changes to your workers' comp rates this year too. So we include those things too, okay? And then the bottom bullet here says we adjust other expenditure accounts to reflect actual and projected expenditures through June of 2020, okay? So we're taking a look at all the different funds. But the slide deck we're going to look at here and these couple slides here are going to look at the general fund, focus on the general fund, okay? So on a positive note, you'll see this first line I'm here. I have my little pointer here, so if I can find it too, on the property taxes, on the LCFF sources. You have property tax increase of $2.9 million. There's also some RDA adjustments too. That's a positive increase over an overall increase of about $3.4 million. Just so you know, I reached out to the county. In Santa Clara County, school districts meet with a tax assessor multiple times a year. Christine shared with me that twice a year here we get information. So from a trend perspective, in Santa Clara County, there's conversations that occur that talk about what the trends we're seeing from both the positive and when there's negative trends too, we talk about that. So I've reached out to the county as well too that talked about the frequency in which we meet and are we having active conversations at a county level of school districts, particularly basic aid school districts, about what those changes are from a forecasted revenue perspective. If there's appeals on the books, Santa Clara County does it a little differently than here too. So that we ever have any anticipated adjustments to our property tax base, there's an active conversation that goes on, okay? So from a positive perspective here, at a high level, what you're seeing is changes to your property taxes. And we're going to spend some time too as a team looking at trends. In a moment or two, I'm going to talk about expenditure trends too. But from a revenue perspective trend, I'm interested to see what's happening in our district now, right? And when we look at property taxes, when we look at that change in October, we get notices in October, what's that trend been? Okay, and how do we incorporate that into our long-term view of what revenue is going to look like and an appreciation of what the process is and that dialogue with the tax assessor? Okay, so this is a positive trend here of $3.5 million or so on the LCFF from a property tax and RDA perspective, so that's good. I think the initial budgeted revenue growth was somewhere in the 5% range. This is representative of about an 8% increase. Your multi-year trend is still showing 5% in the out years. So this year you have about 8% growth, and then the out years you have 5% growth. So as we walk into later parts of the school year this year, and when we get into next year's planning, we're going to take a look at that trend. I want to look back at what the trend's been that might inform how we adjust possibly in the future with that LCFF and that property tax base is going to be, okay? The federal revenue changes here, the state revenue, we're looking at carryover on the federal side. The state side, there's some one-time money that came through, a special ed grant that came through. And then the other state revenues you see here at the bottom, the other revenues, other local revenues, this goes back to what I talked to you from a process perspective when we have carryover. when we do the unaudited actuals, so your local revenues are being adjusted by the carryover, a lot of PTA and donations. So we're recognizing this year's donations, and we're taking a look at last year's donations that may not have got spent. We don't recognize that until first interim, okay? So overall, a positive change to your revenues, and we want to know whether that's one time or whether that's recurring, okay, when we get into the multi-year planning, okay? So that's a high-level revenue view for you. On the expenditure side, what I want to zero on, first of all, I want to go into the services and other operating categories here. So when I looked at this too, and being a newbie like you, Allison, I'm zeroing in on these things and trying to understand what these trends are, right? So when I look at this number here, both from a monetary perspective, numeric perspective, and from a percentage perspective, what we want to see is, are there some anomalies? Is it an anomaly? Is it a one-time incident, or is it a trend? And what is it that is embedded in this? So in each of these different categories here, we've captured for you at a high level narrative what these adjustments are related to. And in the services and other operating expenditures category, you'll see this $7 million growth. About $4 million of that growth, which you see called out here, is related to special ed, okay? Contracted services related to special ed. That's comprised primarily of non-public school placements, non-public agency contracted services, and also when we have paras we bring in, we contract out for services. The first two categories above the first three, we look at the adjustments on, and Alma's slides a little later tonight are going to focus in on this too. There's adjustments to the expenditure categories here for salaries and benefits. And so when I looked at this number here, I wanted to know more in-depth information. And I had a conversation with a gentleman that you contracted with, Jack. I can't recall Jack's last name. Dr. Drinkwater could tell me, but I know the district has done a contract to look at special ed and look at it from a trend perspective and historical perspective and from a relative perspective. Historically, what I wanted to know when I saw this number, is this a trend we see? What's this comprised of? What's embedded within it? And what I want to know also on your behalf, and I want to know when I talk to Jack too, is I want to see this number in context. I want to see our district relative to other neighboring districts, and I want to see what this trend is, okay? So this one also, this increase here in this services category is a bit of an accounting issue. Overall, the budget, when I looked at the prior year within this overall services category, the current year first interim services category just for special education is $12.7 million. Last year, actual for that same category was $11.7 million. So about a $1 million increase between last year's actual and this year's budget, or first interim budget. The adopted budget, however, was $8 million for this category. So this $4 million growth you're seeing between the $8 million and the $12.7 million, this $4 million adjustment is relative to a process that we need to focus in on internally, and we've established, and I'm already set up meetings to talk about these processes, because the adopted budget was a little light on the services side, and it should have had more numbers on the salary side. So it was light overall. Your adopted budget was light, and first term is the opportunity to make those adjustments, okay? So just so you know, we're looking at it from multiple fronts. You've contracted with this person, Jack, to look at this for you on a grander scale, from a trend perspective, from a relative perspective, our district, not just in isolation, from a relative perspective. And also, we as a team, business, HR, student services, are looking at this also. We're instituting regular routine meetings to take a look at this. So we're approaching this so that so we want to make sure that this budget, the adopted budget, when we bring to you next year for the adopted budget, is we're really zeroing in on what that number should be, okay? So your number here, from my perspective, was light. We have adjustment. That's what first interim is all about. You make these adjustments to it. So this is an accurate number. And then my experience too, just in this particular category, is that oftentimes at the beginning of the year, you have contracts for things like non-public school placements that we make adjustments to that budget throughout the year. And my experience is sometimes young people that are receiving these services, there are changes and there's challenges that they experience, and we see some volatility in those numbers. So it's really important for districts, because I personally have had challenges with this particular area from a vendor perspective and from a reconciliation perspective. So we're focusing on that too. But I've seen some big fluctuations over the years and put some practices in place. I want to see it stabilized for us, okay? And we don't want to see this kind of swing. So anyhow, that's kind of big picture on the expenditure side of things. The other things in here too, which you see adjustments that you call out in this narrative, are really a lot of that carryover is breathed into this, and a lot of this year's donations are breathed into this. We need to reflect that adjustment to your expenditures because of those generous donations we're seeing and the carryover from the prior year. And there's some other small things in here too, adjustments, but those are some of the big ticket items we're looking at in here too, okay? All right, so that's kind of revenues and expenditures, and that brings us into this multi-year projection. At the top line here, the LCFF revenue you see here, this has woven into it the current year's growth in property taxes and maintains your 5% growth in the out years for property taxes. Your federal revenues, where you've seen this decline, is associated with some of that carryover recognized in this year. So you have this decline in the out years. The state income, the reason why there's this decline in the out years is because this year we had that one-time money we talked about for special ed, that $1.3 million. So you see from 10.9 to 9.6, about $1.3 million decrease. And on the local income side, again, the local income you're seeing in this year's first interim is inclusive of a lot of that PTA money and the donation money, okay? So overall, that's kind of a recap of that, okay? You take a look at here, your multi-year projection from an expenditure perspective, your deficit spending in the current year, and then the projected for 2021. Your deficit spending as well too, in 21-22, you don't have a projected deficit as yet, but there are still factors that will influence that as we walk through the current year. We work through different things together as a team, as a community, as a district. So this is kind of a high-level view for you as well too of what's happening with your overall expenditures, and that's woven into your multi-year projection, okay? And then we're going to take another look at your multi-year projection, your ending fund balance, and the composition of your ending fund balance, right? What's happening overall in the district. You'll see in that green line there what's happening to your ending balance, going down 38 to 36, and again at 38, it's going up a little bit. And within your ending fund balance, there is an undesignated reserve that, there will still be discussions about what happens with that undesignated reserve, okay? The next slide, we're going to go into what your assigned reserve is and what that's comprised of. I think you're probably all familiar with this. Allison, what I learned too on this reserve line there of 6% is comprised of your economic uncertainty reserve and a reserve the board instituted of another 3% on top of that, so you're at 6%. And then we call it here what your restricted reserve is, and we're showing a little bit of growth in your restricted reserve too, and that's associated with some fund we talked about earlier, okay? So the next slide, we're going to talk about your assigned reserve too, what all the components of your assigned reserve are too. In your first interim, those numbers at the very bottom there, the 19.6, the 16.7, and the 14.9, align with what was on the previous slide, and this gives you a breakdown of what that's comprised of, okay? And you'll see in here two items I would call out your attention to. There is the set aside for the negotiated increase with SMETA, so you see that dollar amount going down in your reserve, aligned with the expenditure that's incurred in each of those years. And then also the early intervention amount of that 1,234,365, it's called out in this reserve because we haven't converted that to an expense in the category above. Once it's converted to an expense and it's realized, that line item gets removed, okay? So that's big picture what's happening with your budget, a healthy budget. Nice to see some property tax growth, some very generous donations from the community, right, also. And this talks about some of our next steps, right? So January, we'll have the governor's budget. And in January through May, we're going to go through our LCAP and budget development meetings with stakeholder groups. In March, we do a board presentation, right, and approval of the second interim. And then in June, you have your LCAP meetings and hearings and your public hearings, and then we do our budget adoption, okay? So first interim, second interim, and then leading into a board workshop. We talk about all the assumptions, and we walk through some of the stuff too. And then just to reiterate again, what we're doing as a team, we're focusing on process. So you guys know my background before coming into education, before managing billions of dollars at HP, I was a business process analyst. at Hewlett-Packard for years and years, so my lens is always gravitates back to process. Process is the cheapest thing you need to do, right? People, systems, and process. You focus on process. That's what we're doing as a team, and that's going to influence how we manage this budget for you moving forward. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys. And so, we'll call the question to approve the first interim.
We want to discuss first?
Yeah, lead into
We
calling
did.
it. Yeah.
I don't think so. We did not have a public comment, correct? No? Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to just say that I am happy to hear that you're planning to meet more or get in contact more often with the county so that we can get some accurate forecasts for the revenue. So thank you for mentioning that. We passed Measure V a while ago, and we were saying it would be about $10 million a year, and seeing this $2.9 million of increase in the property tax revenue was exciting to see. And then I think you mentioned that we also have an increase of about $4 million for the services for special ed, so I guess that kind of takes that plus some. But I was just curious if there was a specific reason why the services for special ed was budgeted low at the original budget, if there was some reasoning behind
My
that.
understanding is it was a systematic issue and a process issue. The systematic part of the issue has to deal with, there's something called a PRF, and there was PRFs that were for particular positions, and the way that the system functions is that PRF, when filled, converts to a line item in the budget. So we're gonna talk about that process too as a team. But that's there's a systematic component to it and a process component to it.
And there's another
Please.
component
Oh,
to it,
please.
which is that we worked really diligently last year to fill certificated staff positions ourselves instead of utilizing a contracting agency. And so we brought more and more folks in-house, brought the cost down. At the same time, we ended up having to use a lot of agency help for our paraeducators. So there was an anticipation of coming down from that original, which you wouldn't know, but there was an anticipation of bringing that down, and it didn't. It did in one area, but it didn't in another. And then we have had an increase in MPS, MPA, which is not expected. So I do think that the regular meetings that you're setting up will help monitor that and be more conscientious of it earlier. But there was the desire to, and we had some success, but not in all areas, so.
Can we just clarify what NPS, NPA is?
So there are students in our district who go to non-public schools or have non-public agency support, and that number has grown.
Yeah, and just to also, that means that those students have much higher needs than what our district can provide. So some examples are like, what is it?
They're usually students who have needs that we don't have staff training for, and so we do seek non-public school placements that have those specialized services.
Any other comments?
I'm okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I actually like looking at the budget, and so I generally have comments and questions. I think it's great, the fresh take, just like you said, it's sort of like your first go through with Allison too. It's great seeing a different perspective of how you're presenting it as well. For a long time, we've looked at the budget and deficit spending, and, we were down the whole 7 million. You look out the 2 years, 3 years, we were 14 million or so deficit spending, and it's great to see that actually in, 21, 22, yeah, that looks like maybe we possibly will have a surplus. And so I I love looking at those numbers and seeing the trends because you're talking about that because for a long time it was really dismal here, looking at deficit spending. So I want to just publicly thank the voters for Measure V because I know that that actually definitely played a major role in us stabilizing our budget. The one question I have is that the increase in the property tax revenue, I know that we get updates. Is it once a quarter or is it once every?
My understanding is we get twice a year.
Twice a year, yeah. I would love to see how we've always sort of flip-flopped between basic aid and LCFF. And as our property increase, property taxes, revenues increase, sorry. I would expect us to move further and further away from that line.
Yeah, I believe so too.
Yeah, and I would just, while maybe it doesn't bode well for housing prices and the general housing shortage that we have, it's better for our budget in some ways. So I would love just to know, like later, like how far above the line, we are later on. Because as we've heard from other districts, whether it's at CSPA or in other things, there is a number of districts around us that are way above the line and have huge amounts of money. Just as I was at a leadership program on Friday, and we have an ADA of about, was it 12,000, ADA average daily attendance. The amount of money that we get per student is about $12,000. And at San Mateo Unified, the high school district, it was something like $17,000 or $18,000 per student, and then Hillsborough was $20,000. So I mean, in Burlingame was actually about 11,000, so they're somewhat comparable. But it was eye-opening to understand that how funding works and how school funding is. And granted, just looking at the budget, you don't really see that, but you do see it if you look.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So I'd just like to thank you as well for, I think the improvements to the process and the system that you're going to be leading with our team. I'm sure that there's a lot of motivation on your team to make these changes, and thank you for being willing to really look at things closely and improve on what has already been done.
I'm thrilled to be here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Okay, so can I have a motion?
I move to approve the first interim report. Is that right?
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And one abstention. Yes. Okay. So moving on to item 11.1, Special Education Program Update.
Madam President, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Rosas, good evening, and good evening to the community as well. Thank you, sir. There will be 5 components to the special education update for this evening, and those are program updates, a higher level presentation of the first interim budget for special education, an update on the special education audit, an update on the special education leadership team, and it will be presented by our integrated classroom preschool teacher, Ms. Christina Blanco, and an update on the special education district advisory committee that will be presented by one of the co-chairs, Mrs. Amy Fickenshire. So for our program updates, we are very excited that for the first time, all special education staff will be at the San Mateo County Office of Education from 8 o'clock to 3:30. I know Rebecca was asking for the time. And we will have an in-depth look into the case management processes and procedures. We are looking into the best practices in the development of the IEP, and some presentations will actually focus on the calibrated implementation of special education processes and procedures. In the afternoon, they will be breaking out to attend behavioral support strategies, and they were asked to sign up under their particular topics of interest. On that same day, although paraeducators were supposed to be off, we have opened a CPI training. It's actually crisis prevention intervention training for paraeducators, and they can participate on a voluntary basis. Last year, as part of the Special Education Improvement Plan to address the achievement gap among students with IEPs, as identified in the Performance Indicator Review, some teachers and schools piloted reading programs. And the reading programs actually were all under SPIRE. This program is actually in alignment with the dyslexia guidelines. And based on teacher feedback, we decided to carry this out this school year. So on January 8th, the Sound Sensible training, which is the basic level of the SPIRE program, will be offered to educational specialists who are serving students with moderate to severe disabilities, while the upper level SPIRE training will be offered to teachers who are serving the RSP programs and educational specialists for the mild to moderate students with disabilities. Just an overview of the first interim report for special education. On the left-hand column, you will see the sources of revenues and the revenue limit sources. 8010 to 8099 actually is the revenue coming from SELPA, and then the federal revenue, other state revenue, and revenue contributions coming from the general funds. You will see that there is some adjustments made on the federal revenue. The $225.11 is a carryover from last year. The $26,301 is taken from the additional mental health grant and projected reimbursement for mental health services. The $3,246,775.16 is coming from the general unrestricted funds. And pretty much these contributions are due to increases in costs and services, and this contribution will balance the deficits, as you will see on the second page. So under expenditure balances, sorry. Under the year-to-date revisions, you will see under the brackets the $249,150, the $276,059, and the $226,220. These are due to unfilled positions, and therefore we had to make adjustments on the revised budget. The really outstanding variable or element on this report is, as stated in Patrick's report, the $4 million adjustment that we needed to make due to non-public school costs and contracted service providers, and this also include transportation, paraeducator costs, and legal fees. And as stated in Patrick's report, we are actually looking into trends and reviewing processes and procedures so that we can take a closer look on how we can be more mindful and make the necessary adjustments to the special education budget.
For the special education audit, the final visit of Sandy Clute and Jack Lucas will be on January 9th and 10th. And they needed to interview one more elementary school staff and one more middle school staff. There will also be a finance follow-up, and they are holding additional parent interviews. They intend to complete their report and do a board presentation on February 13th. I'm going to turn in the presentation to Ms. Christina Blanco.
So I'm here representing the Special Education Leadership Team, and the leadership team actually began about 8 years ago. One of our special education teachers really piloted it as an opportunity for communicating directly with our special education director. And we, members of representing each of the groups, RSP teachers, SDC teachers, came together with the special education director to voice concerns, share information, give feedback, brainstorm. Last year, the leadership team was not held anymore, which was disappointing, and we're very excited that this year Alma has chosen to bring it back, and we've talked a lot about the purpose of the team, that it's not just to share information and improve communication, but we also have, we're working on prioritizing some action items and having some more output from the leadership team. Alma's also brought in some more shareholders to that, so now we have principals. Now we have had leadership representatives, but this year we have 2 principals who are involved. We have a general education teacher. We're looking for one for middle school, but for the first time we're including more shareholders in that meeting to be providing information and feedback and brainstorming. One of the first things that we did was we surveyed our groups, our cohorts, and to get priorities from all of the people, and to kind of condense what are our biggest concerns right now. And then we've shared those and we've looked at them as a group. The special education team, leadership team has looked at them together, and then also program specialists and directors and all of those stakeholders. And some of them have already been addressed, and some of them we are now going through and identifying what are the priorities for us as a leadership team, and how do we want to go about tackling them. One of the other action items that is more immediate is the Special Education Institute, and that involves more training for special education and general education teachers and staff. And so we're looking at what that's going to look like and when that's going to happen, and making those plans.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Amy?
Hi, so I'm here to talk about the CDAC, and we have had 2 meetings. Since then, I've spoken with several parents and summarized the feedback as follows. At the first meeting, parents generally felt hopeful that the district is creating a committee and that there is some opportunity for impact. During the second meeting, I think several parents felt as though the CDAC was used as a sounding board for some district initiatives in special ed, and so it left us questioning if the committee and if parents would have the ability to influence change within the district. Because of this, there was a lot of participation at the last meeting. So there was quite a large turnout at the November CDAC meeting, mostly parents of SDC programs. Parents in SDC program, of students in SDC programs. One thing that we need to do is reach out to preschool parents, parents of students receiving RSP services, and staff, including teachers, paraprofessionals, and more administrators. There were only a few in attendance at the last few meetings, in order to have a broader range of stakeholders on the committee. Many parents voiced specific concerns, and clearly there is work to be done by the district surrounding communication and providing forums for parents to provide feedback and voice their concerns. One thing we've discussed is the desire to develop a mission statement. So it is my belief that in order for this committee to actually serve as a legitimate advisory committee and to be effective, we need to have a charter, bylaws, and mission and vision statements. I've shared this feedback with the district, and we plan to draft and refine mission and vision statements at our January meeting. We'll also work to review bylaws and committee composition. This conversation on structure must clarify ownership of the strategic direction of the committee and an understanding of how the board and district will make a commitment to implementing the feedback received from the CDAC. Some recommendations shared by parents at our last meeting were there were concerns in a variety of different areas. Parents want to look into special education policies and practices, staffing, expenditures, programming, and student progress. But one of the most prevalent concerns was in the area of communication. All around, parents need better communication. It includes wanting to receive more proactive and transparent communication from their children's teachers, school administrators, and the district, as well as needing to know how to communicate effectively to voice their concerns and get their children's needs met. We heard several parents say that they didn't know who to contact in a variety of different situations and had trouble getting that information from teachers and other staff. In terms of some of the activities that the CDAC is looking to focus on this year, there will be a CDAC website that will include information for parents of students receiving special ed services based on a SELPA parent handbook with the addition of some information specific to our district. It will also include organizational charts to help parents know who to contact and how to do so to bridge that issue that was raised. We want this committee's work to bring people together, to help provide information and resources, and to bring forward recommendations to the board on issues impacting students. I believe that this committee has a great opportunity to influence the district and meet the needs of parents and other stakeholders. For us to achieve this outcome, I hope that we can incorporate the feedback that has been provided to me by other parents to really drive value. We've been, as co-chairs, my co-chair Veronica and I have been in conversations with the district, and I do believe that there can be a real partnership between the district and committee members. And so I ask that we present to you again, maybe in February, to provide an update on progress and on meeting what I believe are the right objectives for this committee.
Thank you. We're now opening up for questions from the board.
I'll just start with saying that I would love to have an update in February as well. So we will do everything we can to make that happen. I'm excited to hear all of these updates. One of the things that I think is completely essential is like having like really productive conversations about difficult topics, because that like you have to go through that stuff and pick it apart in order to move forward. So I'm just grateful to have everyone on this team working together. And, I do think that you can have groups of people and different, we're in a big system here, and there's a lot of good intentions, and there are sometimes mistakes made and sometimes very serious ones, and processes and systems that need to really be looked at closely, because it's, kind of in those areas where the biggest opportunities lie. So, again, just grateful that we have folks stepping up to do this really difficult work. And, I definitely want to hear updates. That was a lot of information, but I'm just excited to hear it. And I want everyone to know that we're listening, and we want to do right by all of our students. Any other comments?
I have a few questions. Thank you for the presentation. I really did enjoy also the fact that you included the budget into it as well, so we can really see the numbers. For the audit specifically, we've had various presentations or public comment over the past few months about the audit, and I'm wondering the additional parent interviews and staff interviews. I know that there was a request, whether by the board or the public, that there might not have been enough. In terms of, there might not have been enough, the the consultants who are doing the audit may not have interviewed enough people in terms to get a full breadth of what's really going on. And I wanted to know whether or not the additional interviews was maybe a direct result of the public comment or board direction.
I believe so. As of now, I was informed that our auditors have interviewed 70 participants.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, because I know that as we've gone through this, there has been some public concern about what is really going on and what we're doing, and so I'm glad that we can be responsive to those questions and comments. I'm excited about sort of the parent handbook and the improvement to communication because I do feel like, it is very concerning when you don't know who to call, and so or even to ask questions, and so I really think that that's a great step. In terms of the website, the one question I had for the website, is the website an internal, is it a district website? It's going to be on our website then? So that, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Great. I just wanted to make sure because I know that there are limitations in terms of outside websites if we aren't hosting them ourselves.
So on that note, we want to have the information on our district website so it's really easy to find. And we've been talking about what do we want on there so that it really is easy for people. Well, one of the things that came out of the communication question was who to call. And of course, that changes a lot. So we have an updated org chart. We're going to work on putting that on our website now because that's something we can do right away. And then when the mission and vision statements are ready, those can be popped right in. So we're really going to utilize the district website as a way to start pushing out some of that information that's needed.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Especially for the special day classes, it's sometimes a school within a school, and you don't have the full resources unless you really actually look at the bigger picture of we have 20 schools and, where are all the SDC classes. And when you really think about it, we do have a lot of resources, but we don't know who to call. We don't know what's going on at some of the other schools. And so I think that really helps out, and I'm glad that there's going to be some additional work there. The last question that I had was, actually, I think that, the training, just as a comment, I think it's great, the fact that everyone's going to be there on the 6th, and there's going to be a full, everyone coming together, because I do believe that, especially when you do trainings and you do them off-sites, or sometimes if they're optional or not, you don't get that full sort of cohesiveness and that commitment to really be better. So, but I want to thank you guys for the presentation.
I'm just looking forward to being a part of the CDAC, so thank you.
I just, one other thing, being that there's a real clear, focus on improved communication, I'm wondering if there's kind of an opportunity there to, I don't want to give people more work. So that's, something that's important, but also, we do have a communications committee, can there be some alignment there so that we're working together and being more effective? So I'm not sure how we move forward with that, but I just wanted to call it out and hopefully we can have some thinking around that.
I just wanted to say, being both
You're
the
on both,
liaison
yeah.
to both of those, yes.
Actually, we did talk about it, so we're doing some planning behind the scenes, and we were talking about someone to help us with the vision and mission process. And then also, I'm sorry, Diane, I haven't had a chance to tell you this, but have you come and talk more about communications and how folks would like to see the information. So we have a meeting, Diane and I, tomorrow, so here's a preview.
I had a comment. I just wanted to thank you for the work that you guys are doing, and I'm also excited to hear about the mission and the vision statement. I think that's really exciting. And I was also just curious if we could kind of really keep track of the, I guess, the comments that people are making and then the progress, because I think it's really important that we celebrate the success of the impact that you guys are making, and then also just to kind of keep our eyes open on what else you guys need and how we can all support everything that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, I also just wanted to thank you, Alma, because the ladies on your team here also thanked you for creating that leadership team again. And I do think it's so important to have the right people in leadership so that you can create opportunities for collaboration and really honest conversations. So I just continue to be very grateful for all of the new folks that we have on our district leadership team and the improvements that they're making. So, and bringing people in is really essential. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to item 11.2, LCAP academic metrics, indicators, and targets.
Okay, good evening. David Chambliss with from Ed Services. I'm actually proud to be able to share with you this evening and introduce to you that my co-presenter this evening is our new coordinator, Cameron Lewis, and so I'm going to invite him to come up with me, and we're going to tag team a little bit here. Needless to say, anything that looks good in this presentation is probably because of Cameron. So. We are here this evening to provide one of our kind of quarterly updates on our student progress as we think of it organized around our LCAP goals and targets. It's actually fitting after so many points this evening to celebrating our teachers, to talking about the budget, to thinking about how we're serving our special ed students, to get to the point of saying that this is kind of the point is, or it's one of the points at least, to say, how are we doing by our students? How are our students doing as a result of these outstanding teachers and investments and efforts to build quality programs? So I really appreciate the chance to go toward the end of the meeting tonight, so thank you for that. Our goals this evening with you are simply to, with the board and the community, to build shared understanding of our 2019 CASP Smarter Balanced results, to talk about our progress toward our language arts and math targets, to do a little bit of inquiry around Galileo, which is one of our benchmark assessments, and then also to share with you kind of the most recent data that's part of our core data collaborative. And we promise to not take more than an hour and a half in doing so. We'll try to be fast. I'm just teasing. So I just want to remind you that when we think about how we measure district progress, we are sharing with you tonight the state accountability measures, which are part, we think of as our California School Dashboard. We'll be talking about our local accountability measures, those that we define, which are part of our local control and accountability plan. And then our core district data work, which is not an accountability set of data, but rather really an inquiry set of measures to inform our understanding of how we are doing. And we'll spend a little time talking about the value added of that data. So again, and this evening in terms of the LCAP, we are staying focused on the academic achievement. Obviously, there's a goal area around wellness, there's a goal area around student engagement, but this tonight is focused on LCAP goal area 2, focused on our academic achievement. I want to remind you that our primary metrics and indicators for this goal area are, again, our CASP results, both in English language arts and mathematics. And so that we're measuring the performance of our 3rd graders through our 8th graders. We are also going to spend some time looking at one of our benchmark assessments this evening, which is Galileo, again administered 3rd to 8th. But we want to remind you that in the LCAP, we have targets set around Fountas and Pinnell. Now, we look at Fountas and Pinnell from kindergarten through 5th, but particularly we have goals set at the K2 level because we obviously have other assessments that give us some picture of how the other grades are. And we are just bringing online this year at the middle school level our reading inventory. And so it's the first full year of across the district implementation of that. So we're just getting clear about setting benchmarks there. So with respect to our CAS Smarter Balanced Assessment results, the first data here I want to point out to you, this actually is the data that comes out in September, which we really didn't have a chance to bring to you. It actually is data in the format of talking about how students are not meeting, approaching, meeting, or exceeding standard. And that way of looking at the CASP data is not actually used for accountability purposes. So we kind of wanted to raise it to say this is actually kind of historically what people pay the most attention to. That's slowly changing. But this is what we're often most familiar with. But it's not actually how we think about our progress. But nonetheless, you can see, again, a beautiful butterfly chart prepared by Mr. Lewis that shows you at the center of that chart, you will see the all students performance. And again, this is students who are meeting and exceeding standard. And above are those groups which are performing at higher rates than are all students. And below that, the groups that are performing at lower rates than all students. So I'll give you a minute to kind of look at those percentages and actually the groups that those comprise. I'm going to steal from a point that Cameron made with our leadership the other day. It's not often actually that you see this kind of symmetry in both English on the left and math on the right. Typically, it might be English on the left is sort of descending and ascending kind of in an orderly way. But on the right, it wouldn't necessarily look so even. So it's a little unusual that, in fact, group by group, we have very similar patterns of performance. As we move on, I do want to point out to you that as a district this year, we have identified 2 student groups as groups that we are particularly focused on. I want to point out that call last year, the LCAP was the right one, and that is our students with disabilities and our English learners, because in fact, based on this data, you can see at this point, this is our 2 groups that are most struggling to perform at high levels. Again, while this data is not used for accountability purposes, we actually can do some interesting things with it. And so one of these next 3 slides, we went in and we looked for districts that are similar to ours in size, in percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged, in percentage of English learners, basically districts that are approximately like our district. And we looked at how we did, again, using this meeting and exceeding data compared to those districts. So you can see, and I apologize to folks in the community, it's not so clear here, but you'll see one dark blue dot, which is actually San Mateo Foster City. And then you'll see lighter blue dots, which sort of present a range. And these are the other 7 districts that are much like ours. The red line is just simply the statistical median of the 8 districts' performance. And so you'll see an all students or all grades indicator for English language arts, and then you'll see it broken down by grade level. Obviously, we don't have an 11th grade, so there's not a dark blue dot on that one, and then the same sort of pattern for mathematics. And you can kind of draw your own conclusions. In many cases, we're kind of in the middle. Just by the median or otherwise, on either side of it. So this is the look we see when we look at all students. It's important, as I mentioned a moment ago, though, that we have a focus on 2 groups, English learners and students with disabilities. When we do a similar look for English learners, we note that actually our performance is at the lower end compared to the other 7 districts. Now, there's a little question noted there in the cloud about reclassification criteria, and this is an important point to note that depending on the criteria district uses for reclassifying students out of being English learners to recently fully English proficient, you might have higher performing students in the L group still. And we've started some investigation of this and note that actually some of the higher performing districts actually use some criteria. For example, Alameda Unified, which is one of the light blue dots here, we've determined that one of their criteria is actually meeting standard on SBAC, which is a higher criteria than we use here. So what that would mean is that they would have higher performing students still in the L category and not yet transitioned, where we would use actually what we think is correctly, which you're supposed to use a basic skills standard, not the SBAC meeting standard. And we would be reclassifying students, in effect, earlier than we would see, for example, in Alameda. So that skews the results a little bit, but I just wanted to point out we still know that we have a performance gap for our English learners. And then just to say with students with disabilities, similarly, we have a gap here. We're on the lower end of performance. And so what this causes us to do is, is to say we want to actually spend some time understanding what's going on in some of these similar districts to see what can be learned. And we began this conversation with leadership and intend to follow up and do a little investigating and just sort of some comparative learning from these other systems. So at this point, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Cameron, and he's going to walk through our California dashboard results with you.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees, Dr. Rosas. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm just getting over a cold. I promise I'm not sick still. So before I go into this next piece, which is really going to be focused on the California accountability aspect of it, I do want to draw some clear distinctions between the information that Associate Superintendent Chambliss just presented and what I'm going to present, just so that, we're going to be talking about several different ways of looking at progress. So I just want to make sure that you are all clear about which students we're talking about and what groups we're really looking at, right, when we're looking at the results. So there are benefits and drawbacks, right, to these varying ways in which we're looking at student information. So when we look at the percent meeting, exceeding, nearly, not met, sort of the benefit of doing that is that you're looking at the entire tested population. So all of your students who had a valid score, they are reflected in that percentages, or in those percentages, right, of meeting and exceeding, and not. That's everybody in our LEA who was tested. When we transition to this next piece of it, when we're talking about state accountability, what we have to remember is that we have a different set of business rules that are now applied to our student groups. So we're actually not talking about the same exact students. And that will become important as we decide about what types of metrics we should be tracking in our local accountability plan, the LCAP. Here, right, we have our overall results, right? Oops, excuse me. Our overall results for our English language arts. So this is the state accountability results that were just released last week. And what we have done here for you is that we have tracked how that information is looked at in our LCAP. And so in our LCAP, we're not looking at the percent meeting exceeding. What we're looking at is how far away each one of these student groups are from the minimum scale score, which would have resulted in them meeting standard. So each grade level has a different scale score that says this is the score that you need to be at standard met. How far away from that are you? So if you look at the dashed line, that would be 0. So you are 0 points away from that, from that minimum scale score at meeting standard. You are at standard met, essentially. Anybody who is above that line is above standard met, and everybody who is below standard met. So, this is on average, right? So for each student group, you can see there that all of our student groups, starting at all students to the left, all students, Filipino, white, 2 or more races, Asian, all of those student groups are above, on average, above standard met for the ELA standard. All of our other student groups, starting with our English learners, our Pacific Islanders, African American, socioeconomically disadvantaged, Hispanic, Latino, homeless, and students with disabilities, they're below standard. The yellow bar that you'll see there is how it is tracked to our LCAP. So we've set targets based off of these student groups of where we would like them to be, where we would have liked the results to be in 1819. And you can see that of that district target that we've set, only one student group met that district target, which were our students identifying as Filipino. We did see some progress, right, among some of our other student groups. But again, that's the one that actually met the target. Here's some data statements. Essentially, if you were to go back and look at the all students, right? So that's where we are as a district. All of our students collectively, where are we? We are 24.2 points above standard met, which was an increase of 0.6 points, which according to the state dashboard means that we are at the maintained level. So that's what that first statement is there. The second one is again reiterating that, you know, our Filipino student population, we did meet our district set target with an increase of 4.7. And then lastly, as a note about students with disabilities. So they experienced the greatest increase in points above ELA standard with 11.9. Now, the important thing to remember when we're talking about state accountability is that they reserve the right to change the business rules however they please, right? So when we look at our English learner population in the context of state accountability, we're including our students who have been RFEP'd for the past 4 years, 48 months. That changes that makeup, right, of that student group. So we're not just talking about our students who have that EL designation, but also our students who have been RFEP'd. For students with disabilities, for the first time this year, they've included students' results for those who took the California Alternative Assessment in ELA and math. And so how they've done that, for those of you who are familiar with the ELA and math California Alternative Assessment, there are 3 levels as opposed to 4 for the standard. And so what they've done is that if a student scores anywhere within that level, they receive the highest score of that field. So if they are in the low part of a 2, they receive the score that is the highest one in the level 2. Corresponding, to the traditional assessment. And then same for level 3. There is no level 4 that is taken into account, but it's just the highest level 3. So you can barely make it into a level 3, you'll still be given the highest level 3 scores. So that is just helpful context for understanding our increase there. Now, also know that these new business rules were retroactively applied, so we are comparing apples to apples here from last year to this year. So we don't have a case where, you know, we're not including students last year and then we are including those students this year. So that was ELA, and here's math, right? So the same exact sort of concept, the same exact business rules applied to the student groups. We can see that for math, though, we actually have met a few more of our district targets as outlined within our LCAP. So we've met them for our Asian student group, our Filipino student group, and our African American student group as well. Again, how you would interpret these graphs is that, you know, anywhere where the blue line is above the yellow, we've met our targets, and these are for the ones that are above standard met. And then for everybody who's below, as long as the blue line is shorter than the yellow, we've met our goal, right? So essentially how you interpret it is that if you're below, you're trying to get to that line. If you're above it, fantastic. Okay, similar data statements. We are 1.2 points above, and that's our overall we are 8.7 points above standard met in our mathematics for our students overall, which was a change of 1.7, which again puts us in the maintain category. So we have maintained our status according to the California School Dashboard for both ELA and math. And then we have some good growth here for some of our student groups. Our Filipinos went up 10.6. Our students identifying as African American went up 10.1. Students identifying as Asian went up 5.9. So we have those, I say positive changes, and then we also saw some change for our students with disabilities as well, with that same caveat being there, that who those student groups are now include those students who took the California Alternative Assessment. Okay, so this, as Assistant Superintendent Chambliss stated, we will not be going into our results for chronic absenteeism and suspension this time around. But I did want to make a note about the EL progress indicator. So this was sort of just these are our results as a district. It's just put in a data matrix. The EL progress indicator, we are not receiving change this year, a change indicator. They are waiting for one more iteration of the LPAC to determine the change, but we did receive status. And so what that is that the state has determined, based off of varying percentages of students who are making progress towards English language acquisition, how that is translated into a status of very high to very low. All right, and so you can see that the medium status, right? So if you're right there in the middle, it's anywhere between 45 to 55% of EL students who have increased one level on the LPAC or maintained a level 4. So the highest level that you can have, or if they've gone up one level. Now, to further complicate this, the test that they're using is the LPAC, right, which has 4 levels built into it. But for accountability purposes, they've gone ahead and taken those 4 levels and they've split it out into 6. And so the accountability component of this is that if you've gone up one of these, so if you move from a low 2, right, from a level 2L, which is low, is essentially what they're saying, to a level 2 high, you've obtained that 1 level increase. And so they're going to go ahead and give you that credit. So as you note that happens for level 2 and then also level 3. So the somewhat developed and then the moderately developed. So given that context, this is sort of our, and I apologize for the brightness of the yellow. It's not so bright here. But essentially, what this results in our district being is that overall, we are of a medium status, right? And what that is that 54.1% of our EL population was determined to be making progress using those business rules. So increase 1 level or maintain their 4. And so that's 40% of our districts. Interestingly, all of our middle school students fell within this medium group. And then you see everybody else, we have the majority of districts then falling within the medium or the high, very high. We only had 2 schools falling in the low progress.
I'm going to interrupt Cameron here just for a minute to go back. Questions might be, okay, which schools are in what categories there? And we just want to make sure that both the board and the public know that on this slide, the blue where it says SMFCSD District Schools Summary Reports, that's actually a link. So if you're on a computer and it's a link to a PDF which has all the district report and then every school's report. So it's a resource for you where you can go in and then find what are the specific schools that on the English Learner Progress Indicator scored where.
Okay, and then these data statements are there for your, and your knowledge, right? It's in the presentation. I believe that I've covered all of them, so I'm not going to go ahead and read them to you right now. Okay, so for this next section, this is new. When I started this role, Assistant Superintendent Chambliss expressed to me a need to both look at try to connect the pieces with our LCAP that we looked at. So what is the data? What are the connections? How are we using the LCAP to really drive our work? And then the other piece of it was equity. So he really impressed upon me that we wanted to look at equity and we wanted to look at our LCAP. So to that end, I looked at this section, so our goal 2 section, and I looked at all of the metrics that we have. Right, the CASP, so the assessments that just informed all of that data that we looked at with the distance from standard met, right? So that is one measure. It's a summative measure. It's a test that we give at the end of the year, and it tells us something about our students. It's an overall look at how our students are doing. But we also have these benchmark assessments that we give, so which is our Galileo assessment in ELA and math, and then we have our Fontes and Pinnell. And so my perspective was, these are not sort of discrete items. They are interconnected. They're interwoven by the virtue of the type of assessment that they are, right? So benchmark assessments give you an idea of how a student is doing throughout the year, and then summative says, okay, at the end of the year, what is your knowledge acquisition been? So on those grounds, right, I went ahead and I looked at our Galileo assessments. So this is English Language Arts, overall benchmark assessments. And how were our students doing throughout the year is the question that I asked. And so if you see to the left of the dotted line, we have the percent of students who fell within each one of these levels. So not met, nearly met, met, and exceeded, right, are the levels on the Galileo assessment. And it's given 3 times a year. So it's giving at the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of year, essentially. And so the question is, how are students doing throughout the year? We can see here, looking at our overall, so this is for all of our students, right, that the percentage of students who are not meeting standard is increasing throughout the year. Not much, or not a whole lot from year to year, but it is increasing. And then we see our nearly met is staying relatively stable, around 17%. These are rounded, so that's why the bars are a little bit shorter, even though they say the same number. And then we see the percent of our students meeting increasing, although we do see the percent of our students exceeding, decreasing. So what does this tell me in general, right? So it's saying that, our students are reducing in the exceeding as the year goes on, but they are also increasing in the met. So we can say, relatively speaking, that the kids who are that we're losing to the exceeding category are moving to the met. So they're still in the met and the exceeding. And then, we're essentially seeing kids staying in that category, that meeting and exceeding category. And so if you look to the right of the dotted line, right, you essentially see that play out. So you have the percentage of kids meeting and exceeding standards starting at 65 on that first assessment, and then staying consistent, right, 61% for the mid-year and the end of year. So essentially, kids who, by the mid-year, right, we're looking at the majority of students who are meeting and exceeding standard, they stay that way. This tracks very closely to that final sort of graphic there to the right of our kids who actually ends up meeting and exceeding standard on the state summative assessment. So this is benchmark assessment, 61% we're saying are meeting and exceeding. We got, 62% meeting and exceeding, right, on the actual assessment. What does that translate into? So, again, when I had mentioned earlier about we're talking about actual assessments or kids tested, right, which was the benefit of looking at the meeting and exceeding, right, versus accountability rules. Here, if you are trying to track this to the standard met and above sheet that we just talked about for the accountability rules, you'll notice that there's a little bit of discrepancy here with the number here. It says 23.5. That's because this number, the 23.5 points above standard, is our tested population. So that we're talking about the same exact kids. We have no accountability rules that apply to our local assessments here, right, that sort of take somebody out because they're, because they didn't take a California assessment, or basically what we're looking at here is our actual tested population. And so that 23.5, you can say that translates into what is 62% of our students meeting and exceeding standard translate into? It translates into an average of 23.5 points above standard. So, and feel free to ask questions about that. Now, I said all of that for this one, and I know it was a bit much, but that was so that I can more so quickly move through the next ones. This is our overall students. This is how we're looking. When we take a look at our English learners, right, what we're seeing is much more problematic, right? We see that our kids, for our English learners on this assessment, the percent meeting or not meeting standard, right, is increasing throughout the year. It starts out high, it ends even higher, right? If we look at that same methodology of the percent of kids meeting and exceeding standard, we see that that's consistent throughout. So the same kids who start the year meeting and exceeding standard pretty much end the year meeting and exceeding standards. Meanwhile, everybody else is increasing and they're not met standard. And so we can see that, again, 9% of our students met and exceeded standard on the Galileo assessment. This tracks to the 9% of students who actually ended up at the end of the year on that assessment meeting and exceeding standard, which then translates into an average of 105 points below standard. Now, again, this number is different than the number that I said before because this number does not include our FEPT kids. This is our EL population. And then students with disabilities, is a similar result. That's essentially what I said. And if we go to Galileo Mathematics, it's the same concept, right? So instead of EL, we're talking about math. We see, again, as a district, for overall our students, right, the majority, over 50%, right, are meeting and exceeding standard. We see that throughout the year, we have at least 50% of kids meeting and exceeding standard, and that's how they finish. There is some movement among the groups. Yes, we are seeing an increase of kids not meeting standard, and that's going to track across, right? So across the district, kids are not doing as well in math as they are in ELA. But here, right, when we're looking at the overall groups, we still see that at least 50% of our kids are at least meeting and exceeding standard. But of course, that looks much different when we look at our EL, our English learners, and our students with disabilities. So, okay.
So needless to say, this is actually for us a fresh look at how the results we're getting from Galileo. I mean, we've looked at this data, but the way that Cameron has captured it is giving us raising a lot of questions for us. So just the frame for us around this is, how do we understand what's going on here? How do we think about this assessment and what it's telling us about our kids' success as we go along through the year? And of course, we'll obviously entertain questions that you have. But it's really, for us, it's opening up a lot of thinking about how we can monitor our work across the year. Okay, so we turn now to the core district's data work. And so I realize it's late in the evening, and we probably shouldn't geek out too heavily around how this data is arrived at. So I'm going to go a little bit fast. The key point behind looking at the data that we get from this core data collaborative, and I'll explain a little more about that collaborative, is as we talked about the SBAC data, we talked about the status of student performance. So we said, how high did all students jump in 18-19, right? 23.5 points above standard. That was the height that we got, for example, I think if I've got the number correct, as a group. So we talk about status performance. We also, on the California dashboard, we pay attention to change, which is how high did the fourth graders last year jump compared to the fourth graders this year. Now, the inherent problem with looking at change is we assume that's the same as growth, right? Well, last year we had 23.5. This year we had 24.5, let's say, so we grew, right? And actually, that's a little bit misleading because we're talking about last year's fourth graders and we're talking about this year's fourth graders. And so my joke about this is, yes, they are apples, but it's a bit of Pippin versus Macintosh, right? We are not talking about exactly the same thing. And when you're working from this model at the state level where you've got hundreds of thousands of kids, the statistics are pretty stable, and so you can think of those groups as being essentially the same. When you get to a district, it's a little more problematic. It's something you can make sense of, but you introduce a little bit of a challenge with we're talking about different fourth graders than we were last year. When you get to the school level, it's even more so. And when you get to the smaller school level, it's even more so problematic. So for those of us who are trying to get a sense of what's the actual impact of our teaching, what's the actual impact of our schools, what's the actual impact of our efforts on student performance, it's actually our goal to say, well, how do we think about growth? And that's really comparing how did a child do this year against how they did last year, and how do we track that? And now, actually, thankfully, because of SBAC, which is on a common scale that Cameron mentioned, we can actually do that. And so the Core Data Collaborative took up the challenge of thinking about growth. So just for the good of the order, to make sure that people know, the collaborative is a large set of districts in California. I think it's now approaching almost 50% of the districts in the state. So the set of students in this data set is millions of students. So when we think about what it can tell us, we actually have a really large set, and it begins to approximate, frankly, the state. And so one of the things that we do is, for example, we gave them all of our 18-19 SBAC performance data. We also gave them demographic background data on each of our students. And so I'm going to go through this pretty fast, but the point of what they do is they use that data to create a model where they predict the average performance of a student based on their demographic characteristics. And you can see this is just examples here. And I'd be happy to go into more detail of how this is so. But basically, the end result of it is we get to work with numbers that actually allow us to talk about how a student, even though they may be a student demographically of differences, let's say a student who is an English learner and obviously is coming to the curriculum and able to achieve because of that language learning in ways that could be different from a student who is not English learning. But we can actually control for those differences and compare how they have grown. And I'm going to not go into the details there, but if you have questions about it, I'd be happy to. So, yes. So the point of that is to say, and then because we can do it per child, we can also do it per school. So we bake in the differences between students and, in effect, control for them. And thereby, when we go up to the school level, we can bake in the differences between schools. And so the big point here is we have schools that are demographically quite different. Just to take an example, San Mateo Park compared to Brewer Island. But in the core data, we can actually legitimately compare them apples to apples because of this statistical approach that they take. And well, again, I can go into more detail on why that's so, because at first that seems really counterintuitive. But we can do it using this data model. And then what they do is they actually apply a percentile rank. This is compared to all the schools in the data collaborative for being slower, average, or faster growth schools. And based on that, they then can talk about how schools are doing overall. So for example, in this example, we're looking at a middle school, let's just say it's for English language arts, and the school's percentile rank is 69, which means it's above average to faster growth. Meaning compared to all the other schools in the data collaborative, it's in the 69th percentile, which is quite good. You can also look at it at grade levels. So that allows us to now compare not schools across the data collaborative, but grade levels across the data collaborative. The power of this is we can find, you could look at the 69 for the school as a whole and go, wow, that school is doing really great. When you break it down by grade level, you can actually see, oh, there's actually some variation within that, which affords opportunities for learning and conversation about what grade levels are getting traction and what ways, what kind of supports might we think differently be applied across our schools. We can also get a report that actually maps that school against all of our schools in San Mateo Foster City. So this, for example, would be all of our elementary schools. And if it's mapped where the x-axis is the percentile growth. So the lowest or slower percentile growth on the left to highest on the right. And then the y-axis is, and what's the status performance of the school? How high are kids getting at that school? So the dream is to be a school where you are both high growth and high status, which would be the upper right quadrant in this chart. And if you're a school that has, for example, a high number of students who are struggling to meet standard, for example, some of our schools that have higher English learner count, then ideally the goal is you may be below the standard in your status, but you want to be high growth. And so that would be the quadrant that's on the right but below the line. Then finally, there's a new report that we have as of this year that allows us to compare the percentile rank of a school from 17-18 against the percentile rank of a school in 1819. So that allows us to see how is that school moving in the line. Are they moving up or not? And this is the so-called ordered bar charts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through these ordered bar charts, just because they kind of have a lot of, you can see a lot in each display. So here is performance of our 16 schools in elementary English language arts for all students. And there's a few things I would point out to you. We have 3 elementary schools that are performing in the highest levels of the percentile rank across all the core data collaborative schools. So the first question I would ask is, what's going on there? How can we learn about the instruction? How can we learn about the professional culture? How can we learn about the supports, social emotional learning supports that are going on at those 3 schools that would allow them to be so high performing compared to all the other schools in the broader core data collaborative? Another thing we might call out is a school that in line moved up 39 places. Wow, what happened between 1718 and 1819 to cause that kind of movement? And then, conversely, a school that actually dropped 45 places. What would we understand that was going on there that might have impacted that drop? And then finally, kind of with the text there, from the district point of view, to note that 13 of our 16 schools improved their percentile rank basically by double digits, says, okay, we're doing something right as a district, right? That there's something district-wide that is enabling many of our schools to accelerate up in percentile ranks. Is it the fact that we adopted a standardized curriculum 2 years ago and that's finally getting traction? Could it be the investment we're making in our teachers on special assignment, our coaches at schools that are providing both intervention and coaching supports to our teachers? So again, not an accountability frame here, but an inquiry frame. What can we learn from this kind of data? We could look at middle school. And here across the district, we see that 3 of our 4 schools saw a decrease in rank. Okay, that's not as positive a picture as we saw at the elementary level. So what does that tell us about the work we need to do to support our schools at the middle school level in their English language arts instruction? And we saw one school take a very dramatic drop. So again, what is going on there? What can we learn from that? Going to elementary math, it's a very similar pattern where we have a set of schools that are quite high performing. We have one school that just remarkably moved 61 percentile points up from 1718 to 1819. We have another school that unfortunately dropped. So again, what can we learn from these schools? And again, there is some work that's happening across the district that's getting traction. Again, could we tie this to the adoption of the standard curriculum? Is this where we participate in accounting collections initiative? Is this getting traction? These are the kinds of questions we're asking ourselves and looking at this data to help us talk through. Here is the math data for middle school. And you'll see that again, so we have to think about, we've been investing a lot in, for example, the elementary teachers on special assignment. We're only this year started to add teachers on special assignment at the middle school level. If that's working, which it may possibly be at the elementary level, will we start to see at the middle school level an effect? Obviously we'll have to wait until next year. Here is our English learner performance. And again, what's going on at the 2 schools that are in the 98th and 94th percentile? What is happening at the school where we saw the 27 percentile point improvement? Here's middle school. Again, the need to invest and provide, think about new supports for the middle schools. Here's elementary math. Again, the school that saw 76% percentile point growth. Again, we saw some improvement overall. Middle school, and again, some of the numbers, you can see, we see 2 of 3 schools saw a decrease. So the frame here, and I've used this slide before, is that it's very important that as a system, that you all as our board leaders, that our community, that we all as central leaders, that we need to hit a kind of a through line between looking at this kind of data in a way that doesn't freeze teachers, doesn't freeze leaders to be cautious of looking at this kind of data. We need to use it in a way that supports them and inspires them and causes them to lean in, not back away. So we don't want to freeze people out, but we do know that without pressure, we get no diamonds. So we need to use this kind of data to say, how can we do better? Let's sit down, let's talk through the supports that are necessary. And so clearly, I hope you can tell that we're articulating this inquiry and continuous improvement frame and really focusing on what do we think are the supports that are needed to improve our performance. And just call on Schmoker here to say, if we're not inspiring those in a position to make a difference, principals are closer to kids than I am. Teachers are closer to kids than principals are. As we do the data work, it needs to have the cascade effect of energizing and empowering our folks who are closest to our kids to make a difference. And we need to remind ourselves, one of the huge lessons of NCLB is that accountability system, the research has shown, actually didn't have an impact. It didn't substantially shift the performance of our schools. And we know from working in schools where there has been dramatic improvement that a healthy system, we don't approach the data work and we don't approach this question from a position of blame. So, next steps. We want to come back to you, and you're probably already thinking, like, what are we doing? Like, what are those strategies? So we want to come back to you and talk about, we've been sharing with you some of the hunches. So we want to spend some time talking with you about, what we are doing. We have some really specific work going into the next LCAP, which again is going to be a new 3-year LCAP. We want to do some revision of our indicators and some greater disaggregation so we can really hone in on the equity challenges and strengths that we have. Indicators and targets sort of similarly. And basically we want to continue the engagement with you all and our other leaders to understand more deeply where we're showing strength and challenge. And as I mentioned at the very outset, we need to use the data to go find the places where success is happening and use that as guidance to that work of moving forward. So with that, invite you to ask any questions that you might have.
Me? Okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
I feel like we need to have that one of those instant recesses. That's not I don't think everyone understands what that is. That's like a get up and stretch. We just had a whole bunch of information downloaded, and we just need a second to just take it all in and adjust. First off, welcome, Cameron. Thank you for coming on and for giving us your first presentation. I will like to make one comment. I think the link on the website is broken. So I guess if we can double check the links before the meetings, that would be great.
Thank you.
Because as I was trying to find out the individual schools, I realized, we have the email presentation, but the link doesn't work.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the different perspective, the graphics.
It works for me.
It does?
Yeah, me too.
Sounds like
All right. I take it back then. For some reason.
Yes, sir.
Oh, look at that. Server error doesn't.
Instant feedback.
I don't know. Maybe it doesn't like mine. Maybe I got kicked off the server. I apologize for that. For that comment then. the graphics are great. I think it's a different way of us looking at it. I think in some ways, where there's sometimes optimism, and sometimes when you look at it and you're like, yeah, we're actually not doing as well as maybe we thought we are. And so I think by presenting it, it's really helpful, especially the comparison between sort of the state goals and then our LCAP, our individual goals. And in addition, adding the number of students there as the note, I think it really helps too, because I think sometimes people think, hey, we're not meeting our goal in a certain category, but then when you really look at how small those numbers are, it's difficult to say, because, I mean, 2 or 3 people move up or move down, that could make a big swing in terms of whether our goals are met. In terms of the what is it? Sorry, let me get back to.
Do you want me to get back for you?
No, it was one of the slides, the one that Cameron was talking about when we started talking about how the different levels. Oh yeah, the California dashboard indicators for EL progress. When we started with 4 levels, and then the state decides to go to 6. Sometimes I feel like that's sort of job security, right? You make it more difficult to actually explain and everything else, and to analyze. And I feel like maybe the state is just making it more difficult for us to make sure there's a job security there on their end. But so I'm grateful for you guys for sort of breaking it down. It is complicated, and it takes a lot to sort of understand. So I want to thank you for that. The Galileo test, and I'm maybe wrong. My son is now in 4th grade, but I know he started taking it at 3rd grade. I was under the impression that the Galileo test doesn't change from the beginning to the middle to the end. Does it?
Yeah, just to say, it is an assessment of all the standards that we would expect a child who's taking it, for example, in 4th grade to be learning in 4th grade. There is actually a bit of a difference between the first administration, because the first administration is sort of entry. Frankly, the depth of knowledge of the questions in the first administration is not as deep. Whereas when you get to T1 and T2, which is, sort of late fall and early spring, then it is, which is why, just to say from a change point of view, we pay a lot of attention to T1 to T2, basically from now through to March.
Yeah.
That's the 2 performances that we spend a lot of time focusing on.
No, thank you. I had a misunderstanding. But it does show like some of the, whether it's, the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, or the end.
Yeah.
It does show that, at least from the Galileo graphics that you provided, it does show that, there is more work for us to do, especially in the different subsets. In regards to the core data, I really do like it. I do like the idea that, when you look at the individual growth, when you look at apples to apples, it is a better comparison, even if the state's not using it as a testing method. I'd be really curious about, when you talk about the diamonds and, trying to find things, as we institute, counting collections or Common Core or whatever it is, to find where those successes are, and then to celebrate the successes, and then really to share those lessons that, across our district of, look, this really worked. We didn't have counting collections last year, or maybe in this class, and then this year we have, and boom, look at our numbers, or look at the growth. And I think that's a great way to sort of to look at the core data and a great use of it if we find those diamonds. But overall, I just appreciate the presentation. Again, welcome, Cameron. The data is great. The graphics is just a really different way of looking at it. Sometimes it gives me hope, and sometimes it gives me sort of heartache, because it's like, gosh, there are some areas that we do need to improve. But again, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you guys for the presentation, and just all the work that you guys put into pulling all that data together. We've wanted the sort of kind of trimester report on data for a while, and so I'm very excited that this will be the first of, two more such presentations where we're looking at all of our data in a really comprehensive way and having an opportunity to talk about what that means and the supports we can provide. And, as always, David, just appreciate your framing of this and how we kind of look at it and talk about it and, how that then trickles down to our site leadership and our educators. I feel like these presentations are always really hard because I think while there's a lot to celebrate, right, we're naturally kind of focus on all of the areas where there's improvement. And I think some of these charts just show how much work there is and how big the disparities are, I think with the first couple of graphs, just, those disparities are just huge. And that's, it's a real problem, and it's, you think about our students that are in our classrooms every day and that being their reality and feeling a real sense of urgency around that. And so, it's a balance in terms of how you kind of, as you said, around the pressure piece and how we get to the root cause of that. So, I can definitely appreciate looking at where there are successes. And I guess I have questions around, like, what are the ways that we're thinking about identifying root cause for some of the challenges, too? And I'd be curious to know, either now or in future presentations, if, you can provide any additional information around what that looks like. I'm also curious a little bit as to what those conversations I guess look like with site leadership, how that impacts data meetings, like what does that look like? How are we drilling this down for sites, and then how does that then impact both in terms of like where we're leveraging strengths and utilizing that to move forward, but where we're having those difficult conversations about what the reality is and how we move forward there, and of course how we can support. I know that you're still working with site leads on kind of processing all of the data, and so I know that the actual schools around the core weren't shared. I think it's important. I think it's hard to be kind of transparent about where we are, and appreciate that we're doing that now. And I think part of that is including where schools are, and are these the same schools? Are they different schools as it pertains to all students versus English learners versus ELA versus math? And what does that mean? Because I think that makes a huge impact in terms of like conversations that we'll have around LCAP. And, as we'll be digging into a series of study sessions on a variety of issues that will potentially impact various supports. I think it will be really important to narrow down as to what some of those are, not to, again, as you said, not to blame, but really to think about how we provide support. And then I know I've shared this about the core data before, so I don't mean to be a complete Debbie Downer here, but I feel like in general, California isn't doing that well. And so when you think about comparing us to other districts, like there's part of me that's excited about where we see big growth, but then I'm also thinking about that in the context of subpar performance overall. And so like, what does that actually mean in terms of our student performance and preparing our kids to be successful long-term? So I know that that's not a positive thing to say, but it's the reality. And so I'm curious as to, I know it's hard sometimes to pick apart this data in that way, but I'm curious in terms of like, if, for example, those 3 schools that we looked at that I assume are the same 3, but maybe they're not, if those schools made that progress every year and that continued into middle school, then would that group of students be high school ready? And how do we know that? Because if they're still not, then it's not enough, even though it's great to celebrate it, right? So I guess I'm saying then I wouldn't want us to be too comfortable there either, right? I know I just asked a lot of questions and said a lot of things, so I don't know. Take that where you will.
I would like to thank you both for the presentation. I do like the layout of the graphs and the explanation of the comparison, and kind of recognizing that growth needs to happen. Unfortunately, it was significant decline in some areas, but just your spin on it that it's not about the who, but the why and how we can, make that better. So that's just one outlook that is really going to make a huge change, I think. If you're viewing it as a, hey, it's a positive thing that we can, it's not positive that we're doing bad, but, you know, you spin it as, hey, let's do something about it in a positive way. I would just really appreciate that. So thank you.
I also would like to thank you for your presentation because now I understand this so much better than when I just read it to myself, so thank you.
Sure.
I am interested in hearing when you go and figure out, when you look at the charts where you compare to the 7 similar districts, what the differences are there. I know you mentioned that the English learners may have different classification, but with the students with disabilities where we're so far on the low end, I'm curious to hear what you find out there, so looking forward to that. Hold on one second. Also on the Galileo stuff, I know it's nice to say, you know, most of the students met or exceeded the standard. I think that it's also important to look at the kids that were in the nearly met category and may have fallen down to the not met, because that is a big deal for, especially as a parent, to have a student that maybe was close to it and now they're kind of falling behind. And I think the same could be said for the students that were exceeding the standard and maybe fell into the met category. So I'd like to just continue to kind of look at all the categories instead of just, you know, like most students met. Hold on one second. And I did like the core data. It was hard for me to understand it, but now I get it better. But I'm just curious, and I know you're going to probably get to it at some point, but some of these large increases and large decreases in the percentiles, what could cause that? Are we talking just growth, and so they didn't grow, or are they actually really declining in such a drastic fashion? And so I'm curious to hear that when you have that, or if you have an example.
Just to respond to that, it's quite interesting when we talk to leaders, and so one of the differences between last year and this year is that as we're sharing the information around the core data, we're now whereas last year it was really a leadership conversation, so primarily with administrators. We are now working with teachers on special assignment in these data meetings, as well as with doing presentations to teaching to staffs. So just to say we're sharing the data more broadly, which is, you know, the next step is to give those folks a chance to make sense of it. But when you talk to leaders that experience, they see either this dramatic growth, many of them can go to, oh, I would bet it was this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. And a classic example in a small school where there's 2 to 3 teachers, and one of the teachers, actually the position, there were 3 teachers in that position throughout the year, and the impact that it has on kids' performance when they don't have a stable teacher throughout that grade level can cause a pretty dramatic drop in the grade's overall performance. Or where the team is collaborating in a new way, and they're really lined up, and there's a focus on the content area, how leaders will say that is having a positive impact. So it is, the nature of being in education is you can't say this caused this exactly, but people have really good ideas, and it feeds their interest in saying, I understand this, and I'm going to go further with it based on it.
And then I just have one last question for the the core, I guess the predicted score and the actual, where does that go? Is that just teachers and principals? Does it go to the parents? Will they know if their student, because I know we get the Galileo results when we go to conferences and stuff, but does that go anywhere to them, or is this just
The only information that would be shared outward would be the percentile ranks, okay, which is kind of the crunching. We actually, I don't even see the individual okay, student, exceeding or meeting the predicted growth. Okay. That's held by the core districts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to keep this a little brief. I just want to welcome you, Cameron, to the team. We're really happy to have you. I was like, who is that person? Who's new? And then you got up and presented, so now I know. I think for me, something that really stands out is that, I really do like the graphics as well. I think it's it makes it a more clear picture for folks. I will just be honest and say that that was a lot of data, and my head's kind of like this right now, like with all the data. But I'm just so happy that you guys understand it. I understand. I think to me, it really makes sense of something that I already knew was a reality. Like, these things are not surprising to me. I do feel, I mean, some of the things, some of the growth I think is really essential and kind of like the missing key to how we kind of move things forward. Being that, you know, closing the opportunity gap is our biggest priority. You know, we're going to have all of those keys that are hidden in this data to really, you know, to focus on bringing up those most struggling students and those most struggling schools. And I absolutely think that, you know, if we're going to be equity-minded, we do have to focus on those things primarily. I was wondering in terms of, so I know we don't have the schools named on what we looked at, but I'm pretty sure that probably some of the highest performing ones are in Foster City. So I'm thinking about, you know, comparing schools, and are we, you know, yes, we're looking at kind of like the same factors in the data, but are we looking at things that aren't in these assessments, right? Like socioeconomic status. Like, can you compare a school that has like 3% socioeconomically disadvantaged students to a school that has like 80%? And I mean, you said that there are ways to do that and like dig really deep, so that's important. But I think that I'm just curious about like how exactly, like what that looks like. How do you do that exactly? Yeah, I really like the continuous improvement framework. It can be, if you think about, you know, as a, you know, I think about like my job, you know, and my performance review in my job, in my career, like all the ones that I've had, like if that was like public data for all these parents and all of the community to see, like that's really like a vulnerable place to be. Especially when it can, you know, you can drill so deep. But I do think that it's really important that we do that. So just, I'm grateful for, you know, moving in that direction in a way that feels safe and supportive for everybody involved. Yeah, I don't have a lot of questions right now, to be honest. But yeah, thank you.
Just one thing about the core data, just to go back, just real quick. You see 3 schools here in English language arts that are in the 90th percentile. None of those actually are Foster City schools.
Really?
Yeah. So just we would predict based on socioeconomic status, that kind of thing. But from a growth point of view, that's not the case. And for math here, only one of them is.
Wow.
So.
That's
Yeah.
like amazing. See, because
Yeah,
even
so
like
it's just
my
a
own
different
assumptions
view.
are wrong, and that's why this kind of data is so important, because
Right.
it gets to challenge those
Yeah.
assumptions. And okay, I'm really excited about all
Yeah.
of this. So yeah, can I just thank you both again for doing this work? And I'm sure that you know, it's going to trickle down to all areas in our district, and you know, just the way in which it's presented, I think, is so foundational for how successful closing the gap is going to be. So
Thank you.
Okay. I'm like, oh yeah, it's me. Okay, so moving on to board member statements and requests for future agenda items.
I don't have any because I think we have a lot already.
think this was already captured, and I believe it'll be in this special education presentation with the audit, but the updates from, I think, the teams when we do special education presentations, I think would be great from the CDAC and the SLT. I know I missed some of it, but.
I would, on Friday, during leadership, we were at Samta High School, and they had the whole pilot program of the Yonder pouches, which is basically the smartphones that you had to put away, and it was put away. And I will just say that it is amazing to actually walk around during lunchtime and you see the kids sort of talking to each other back like when we were all in school versus like on the phones and looking at movies and sort of the cyberbullying that happens too. I would love to know whether or not at CSPA there was a conversation about a smartphone policy, that there was discussion, and I'd love to know from our middle schools whether or not they are facing certain challenges there. I don't think that we need the Yonder, but having a consistent smartphone policy would be great at each of the schools, so this way that there's that they can understand the positive and negatives of being on the screens, whether in passing or during classes or at recess. Additionally, in terms of the facilities plan, I know that we're going through that, and there have been conversations about that, and there's a plan in place. During the CSBA also, when I talked about the climate change, there was a discussion about solar, and I know that the impressions that I got from the sessions is that the energy environment, whether it's because of the PSPS, the public service, the power shut-off, PSPS, I don't know, it's public service power shut-off, yes, system, that the whole energy market, and with PG&E being sort of in bankruptcy and Governor Newsom sort of not allowing them to get out of it, there's a whole shakeup on the sort of the energy market, and the idea is that there is going to be a real opportunity for us to apply for funds and get grant funds for solar. And so I know that as we talked about the facilities plan, it was sort of a minor add-on in terms of it, but the idea is that if we were somehow to do a more in-depth, solar plan or at least study in parallel with the facilities plan, we might have a real opportunity in 2020 to obtain some serious funding for it. And I think it would be great for us to sort of jump on that if we could. In coordination with that, I'd love an update on the AC pilot, the air conditioning pilot program that we had, because it does take a while for us to figure out what we're going to do, and June will be here before we know it, along with the heat. And then lastly, I'll just say from the CSPA conference, just as a statement, there are so many districts up and down California that have many different challenges in comparison to ours, like, for example, who are budget deficit spending, or have serious issues, whether it's immigration or homelessness or whatever it is. And I just wanted to say that, even though we do have issues, and we do have a lot of issues, and sometimes they boil up and become major issues, in comparison, bless you, in comparison to the rest of the districts in the state, I feel very fortunate to be serving the district that we are in. And lastly, I'll just say as a statement, just happy holidays. This is our last meeting before the holiday season. I hope everyone has a good break.
Great. So I actually have one request for a future agenda item, and it is something that not that I learned about because I knew about this already, but it was a good reminder. There actually are K through 8 school districts that are taking on ethnic studies in their curriculum. So I would just like to throw that on the table and explore what that looks like. I'm doing my own research, but yeah, I think it would be good for us to consider and look into it. Okay. Any other last things?
I just wanted to say that I enjoyed my first school board meeting, so thank you, and happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't forget about you, John. Superintendent report out and future meeting dates.
All right, and due to the lateness of the evening, I will just say happy holidays to everyone, and I will let you read the list of events that you will need to be in attendance in January, so happy holidays again.
Okay, do I have a motion for adjournment? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We are going back to closed session. Do we motion for that?
No.
No, okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, no, we're not motioning.
We're
Adjourning.
Oh,
We're
right.
going back to closed session.
I take back my motion.
Oh, sure. You want us here? Or, okay. We're going to take a picture.